And obviously we're having more mass shootings and school shootings, but thank God they are still extremely rare. So this is where we've gotten. Kids spend an average of 4 to 7 minutes a day, that's it, in unstructured play without their parents interfering with them. They almost never go outside and play anymore. Listen to this paragraph. In 1979, a 1979 book listed the things almost every first grader could do. Travel alone in the neighborhood. First grader, did I say that? 6-year-old. Mm-hmm. Travel the neighborhood 4 to 8 blocks by themselves, to go to the store, to go to the school, to go to the playground, to go to a friend's house. If you did that today, somebody would call DCF and have you turned in as a negligent parent.
Well, unless you're a Japanese little kid. What's the name of that Japanese show where the little 2-year-old walks to the supermarket?
Yeah, they have a little flag.
Like a mile away. What's that? What's that? Old enough.
But it's a great show. You see this kid is about 2.5 feet high.
Exactly.
They have a little flag so people can see them going down to buy salt.
Her whole point is about independence. That essentially, if you stifle independence by giving your kid a phone to use in school to stay in touch with you, as I said before, she argues, I totally agree with this, that kind of inhibition stays with you for the rest of your life. You basically believe you can always reach out to a parent or somebody to save you from unhappiness or misery or pain, which is just not true, and you're not ready for the real world. 877-301-8970 is our number.
The school principal was talking about how parents, are calling their kids on their Apple phones and giving them messages during the day, or kids are sneaking to their lockers if they take the phones away and put them in the locker to text their parents during the day. And it's stuff like, I forgot my homework, Mom. Can you bring it to school? If you forgot your homework, maybe you should pay the consequences.
Well, you're also not listing the primary argument young kids use, which I think there's an answer to, which is if you want to look at porn, wait till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Would you not agree? 877-301-8970. By the way, I didn't mean, this is a really serious topic, and a lot of parents really believe, because they pick an example in a school shooting, Uvalde, that sort of thing, where a kid was able to text the parent, etc. It is much more important, forget the independence, it is much more important that a kid is not distracted by communicating or attempting to communicate with a parent, and instead focusing on the teacher, the principal, whoever it is, who's trying to lead them to safety in some fashion, rather than looking at their damn phone.
I guess what this story, to me, makes so clear is that we are living lives anticipating the worst possible horrible thing that could happen. But what is happening, and this has happened since that 79 when I mentioned this, is that massive amounts of anxiety, depression, mental health issues among kids, which weren't there back then. So that's one of the results of this, because we're sheltering our kids so much and teaching them to work, watch out for the worst disaster.
By the way, the reason I was laughing, I was not laughing at you, I was laughing because one of our colleagues put up a note, if you want to watch porn, wait till 5 o'clock, tell that to the workers at City Hall. 877-301. Actually, they're blocked for the most part, which is really sad. Let's go to Al on the road. Al, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling, Al. Hey.
Good morning, folks.
Hey.
I have 2 kids. My daughter's 13. My son's 11. My daughter has a phone. My son does not, and boy, is he upset about that. But I don't think that they're necessary in school. I think they should be turned off the second you walk through the doors, turned back on when you leave at the end of the day. It's great for pickups, but like after school, after sports and things like that. But these kids certainly don't need phones in their hands during the day at school. It's too much of a distraction, and frankly, there's too many distractions already out there.
By the way, Al, I missed the order of, I know you have an 11 and a 13. Is the reason the son doesn't have it is because he's the 11 and you consider him too young?
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
And does your third... You go ahead.
He's one of the only ones of his age that doesn't have a phone, and that makes it difficult.
So does he hate you?
For a number of reasons.
But get back to your daughter for 1 second, the 13-year-old. Do you tell her that she can't use it or have it on during school hours? And if you do, does she listen to you?
She's pretty good. She doesn't generally have it on during school.
Good.
But my son would be on it all the time.
Yeah. Al, thanks for your call. We appreciate it. 877-301 8970.
Here's one that's talking about exactly what I'm talking about, the worrying about the worst case scenario. I'm a grandma to 2 teenagers in Tennessee. I think phones should absolutely not be banned. These poor kids are
Not be banned?
Not be banned.
Okay.
These poor kids are sitting ducks and need every resource available for them to survive. Need I mention Uvalde and how the armed adults were too stupid or afraid to intervene?
Yeah, and Uvalde is always an example chosen. What did a kid having a cell phone do to save them in the wake of the cowardice of the police officers who were in the hall with the same weapon the shooter had and did nothing for an hour? How did that help them?
It didn't help them. We even had a kid there that was calling 911 and talking about the shooter still being in the room, and they didn't do anything.
So why do they keep, and the story cites it as evidence too. One of the stories in favor of phones makes the same, I don't understand that.
Well, this is, people want to be able to instantaneously be assured that their kids are okay, or instantaneously be in touch with their kids if something happens. Here's another one. My son is a freshman at Quincy High. They had 2 bomb threats last month. I was very grateful that he could text me and tell me he was safe. So it's thinking. It's the active shooter. It's the bomb threat. It's the fire at the school. Whatever people want to.
But to what end? For momentary satisfaction?
Well, they're trading off. That's what this story makes the point of. They're trading off the ability for children to have the self-confidence that they can function by themselves in a difficult situation. It's always mom and dad, mom and dad,
but
mom and dad.
Then they're obviously ignoring, as you mentioned a minute ago, the dangerous impact, not only on the independence thing I mentioned, but on the mental health of these kids who essentially are on their phones 24/7. I really don't. I mean, I understand it, but I think the argument is really an empty one. Taryn in the car, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome, Taryn. Hi.
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 So yes, I agree that phones in schools are not great, but we don't live in a society where we can trust other people. You know, we live in a society that we're only worried about us. We don't care about others. It's not the same world that it was 30, 40 years ago. So I do think that, you know, where we could have relied on our neighbor to watch over our kids, you know, we can't do that anymore.
Well, wait a second, Taryn, I have to say, the place I will disagree with you is I think virtually every teacher, principal, school employee I've ever met in my life cares about kids. And, you know, maybe Ron DeSantis thinks they don't, but do you really believe that people who work in the schools don't care about the children that they are charged with protecting? I surely do.
I not in school. I do believe that school, yes. But as we saw in Uvalde, we can't always rely on what others do and what the school does. I do think that we live in a society where, you know, you kind of have to watch out for yourself because we're not watching out for others, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, again, you were right about the police in Uvalde. There's no question. We've all seen the video. But the issue is, did kids having phones help keep them safe and live longer? And at least my recollection of that history is the answer is no. But Taryn, thanks for your point of view.
Yeah,
we appreciate
thank you for the call, Taryn. Although I don't know if people have changed. I think our knowledge of what goes on has changed. Everything is, we have a 24-hour news cycle. We hear about what terrible things that happen in Utah or Seattle, Washington, or across. Yeah, I don't think. I mean, we got to remember that priests of all people were raping children in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. We just didn't know about it, and I don't know that. You know,
some say it's not over, by the way.
Well, some say
people like Mitchell Garabedian, who's representing.
Well, okay. I mean, I don't think human beings have changed. I think our communications have changed. Anyway, 877-301-8970 is the number. Maggie,
would you, by the way, our kids are average. Our 5 kids between us, 3 you have, 2 I have, are average age 30. So obviously they weren't. This wasn't an issue when they were at least in elementary school. Would you have put a phone in the hand of your kid?
I don't know what I would have done, but I do know that I let my kids walk to school, and I was always nervous about it because I thought if something happened, people would say I was a bad mother for letting them walk to school.
By the way, you didn't finish that. When you mentioned the abduction thing, I mentioned really rare. You should have finished the thought. Is the vast majority of abductions are not stranger abductions. None. They're almost 100% people you know, an uncle, a family member, a friend.
That's what changed. In the 80s, people became hysterical about stranger abductions, and daycare sexual assaults and all this kind of stuff, and most of them turned out to be, in terms of daycare, it's not true. And there are very, very few stranger assaults. It's usually, the slippery boyfriend. He's usually the prime suspect. Is the mom's slippery boyfriend, or other family members, or people that Gail in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Gail.
Hi, actually, it's Jill.
Oh,
Hi,
sorry.
Jill. Sorry, it was Marjorie's fault. Go ahead.
That's okay.
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Long-time listener, multiple-time caller. I just wanted to let you know my son goes to Shawsheen Tech, and they have a fabulous cell phone policy.
Which is?
The minute they walk, they can have it. The minute they have to shut it off the minute they walk in school. They can have it at lunch, and then they can only have it after they leave school.
I think that's great. Do they put them in a pouch, or what do they do? How do they enforce that?
No,
Jill?
they're allowed to keep it on them, but if they are caught
Great.
even looking at their phone for the time, it's confiscated for the day. If they get caught twice, it's no longer allowed in school.
That's great.
But I don't think that's great either.
Why?
Because I don't think they should have it at lunch. Why don't they talk to each other at lunch?
Well, that's a good point.
The Florida
That's a good
policy
point.
says no lunchtime, and they've noticed that what's happening at lunchtime is kids are talking to each other at lunch instead of looking on their phones all the time. Listen to this one.
Jill, thanks for the call. Thank you for sharing that.
Michelle from Connecticut, she's a teacher and a parent. My kid's high school allows phones. Now there are a dozen or so Instagram sites that take photos of other students without their permission and post them on corresponding sites. There's a sleeping kid one, an eating kid one, even a pooping kid one.
That's nice.
One of my kid's friends, she now feels uncomfortable doing anything, even eating, because she's worried someone's going to take a photo of her and post it on Instagram.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
So we have to take a break. Before we take a break, you mentioned slippery boyfriends. Did you read our favorite Meredith Goldstein's most recent column?
Was it about a slippery boyfriend?
Well, sort of. Not
Oh,
quite.
yeah?
You didn't read it?
No, but I remember.
My boyfriend slept with my mother.
Oh,
Is the headline.
jeez.
Yeah. Now, it is true that the boyfriend slept with the mother before he met the woman who he is now, the daughter he is connected to, but that still was a rather provocative
Yeah,
moment.
it's bad. Okay, we're talking about whether kids should have cell phones in schools or whether they should be banned. Our number is 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. Michelle Wu will join us in person from 11 to noon on November 14th for Ask the Mayor. And I should also say, in about 15 minutes, you're going to hear some spectacular music if you need a little spirit lifting from White Snake Project. So do not go away. If you're just tuning in, we're taking your calls and texts on cell phones in schools. Which side are you on? A lot of people think they're a distraction. They inhibit independence, growth on the part of the kid. Others, as you heard some of these texts here a minute ago, suggest they're a critical lifeline. At least some of the parents think that. Should they be allowed or banned? The number's 877-301-8970.
Here's from Caitlin in Boxborough. As a former high school math teacher, during my last year's teaching, I spent a majority of my energy keeping on top of kids' phone use during class. It was awful. At a different school I worked at, phones were not allowed in the building, and I could actually focus on teaching. Let's go to Kendra in Rhode Island. Thank you for calling, Kendra.
Hey there.
Hi.
Hi.
So my thought is, I think there are really good age-appropriate solutions for kids to have phones. I have a 13-year-old son, And when he was younger, and probably like 5th or 6th grade, wanting to walk to the park by himself, he had a relay, which was like a little walkie-talkie that only I had access to. Now he's older. He wants an iPhone really bad, but he has a kid-safe smartphone that allows him to call me and use educational apps like Duolingo. But I do think they should not be allowed in school. He's not supposed to be texting on it. And it's funny that you're talking about this today because I just got a text from him this morning when he's supposed to be in class asking me to buy him the Fortnite Battle Pass. So I don't think
That is great.
they should be able to have them in school.
What'd you say to the kid, Kendra?
I told him to wait till he gets home. We'll talk about it when he gets home.
Excellent. That's a really good story, Kendra.
You know,
Thank
go
you.
back to this
And
globe piece.
thanks for sharing the alternatives too. We appreciate it.
Since the predator panic of the 1980s, grown-ups in America have been allowing kids to do less and less. Today, 1 in 10 kids, 1 in 10 walks or bikes to school. I mentioned before that kids spend 4 to 7 minutes a day. That's it. Outdoor unstructured play. That's according to the National Recreation and Park Association.
Incredible? Is that incredible?
A study out of the University of Michigan found 85% of parents of kids aged 9 to 11 will not let them trick or treat with friends, without adult supervision.
Do you remember, we've been on the air almost 25 years together. Do you remember when we first heard the term helicopter parent and we both said, how perfect is that to describe what's happened to parenting and kidding here in America? Let's go to Maggie in Somerville. You're on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
When I lived in Georgia, I taught technical college.
Oh.
And I had young adults in my classroom, and they knew they could not be on their phones. It's really easy to see if a kid is on their phone. So I would call names and say, put it away. And they would. If they took a call, they had to leave the room, and the door locked behind them. They could come back after break.
Wait a second. How did they know? You said at the beginning of that, Maggie, they knew that they couldn't use their phone. Was that just the school policy, or what was the deal?
That was me.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's the Maggie policy. And did they resist, or were they okay with this? Were they okay with that?
They were fine.
Good.
There's also a culture in the South that God forgive me, if the older white lady tells you to do something, you have to do it.
Well, God forgive you. That's right. Thank you, Maggie. We appreciate the call. Actually, we should have said to her, what was the movie that Matt Damon did where he's texting with his cell phone in his pocket? Was that The Departed? Thank you, John. Of course, John would know that. John Parker. I didn't even finish the question, and John Parker had the answer. 877-301-8970 is the
Listen to this.
there.
This is from this Globe story, again, by Lenore Scanazzi. It's called Cell Phones in Class Aren't Making Kids Safer. This is a letter that the parent received from her child's principal. It has come to my attention that some first-grade students are using smartwatches during school hours. Even more concerning is that they are receiving incoming calls from their parents.
Is that unbelievable?
Yeah.
That is really unbelievable. Let's go to Kelly. Oh, Kelly is a member of the Braintree School Committee, apparently. Welcome, Kelly. Nice to talk to you.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Marjorie. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for calling.
I thought I would weigh in as a school committee member as well as a parent.
Great.
So I have a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old, so she graduated. But this year, the Braintree Schools was able to secure a grant that would do a couple things. One is to give each classroom teacher a pocket to put in their classroom in the high school. So when the students enter the classroom, they all have to put their cell phones in this pocket so they're not using it.
I like that.
Yeah, so we're implementing it. You know, we got a lot of pushback from the kids, of course, because, everything was lax during COVID and they had their phones and whatnot. So, we're trying to do that. And also in conjunction with that, we're actually reaching out to PTOs and having educational seminars and asking parents in the elementary schools to take a pledge to not give their kids a iPhone until middle school.
Hey, Kelly,
Wow.
you mentioned you got a lot of pushback from kids. How about the parents of those kids? Were they okay with that or no?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really get a lot of emails saying that we didn't like this, because I think for the most part, most parents are supporting this. They know
Good.
that it's a distraction.
Great.
And all the kids at the high school have Google, they have laptops, or, they have their own, devices that they can use. So they're doing research and doing things on a computer. They don't need their phone.
Understood. Hey, Kelly, we're really glad you called. Thanks. Braintree seems to be on the right track. I like that. Thank you so much for the call. We appreciate it.
Here's a good one. So kids need a phone in case of emergency, but the emergency, oh God.
Lost it?
Yeah, it just disappeared.
Oh, it's so sad.
I know, they fly around in here sometimes.
They're really flying around.
They're flying around. I'll find it in a second.
Okay, good. Okay, let's go to John in Westford till Marjorie nabs the flying around text. Hi there, John. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. First-time caller, second-time listener. Love your show.
Thank you.
My kids, there was a bomb scare at my kids' school, quite a few years ago, and they actually relocated them to the town hall and then somewhere else that wasn't secure, and it was when those robo bomb calls were going on. And they actually ended up in another town at some meeting hall. So I'm definitely, we need this. The phones in the school system. I mean, but you're right. The cafeteria, it's sad. It's dead quiet in there.
John, why couldn't the school administrators just text or email the parents
or do
and
a blast
say,
text? Yeah.
Why not? Why do you have to hear from the kid?
I have no idea.
Well,
I have no idea. It was a big cluster.
Yeah.
But had they done that, would you have been satisfied if your kid didn't have a phone?
I'd still want to hear from them.
Hey, on a much more important note, why is this only the second time you've ever listened?
Oh, I have no.
What have you been doing?
I usually listen. I'm very conservative. I usually listen to WRKO.
Yeah.
And it's a long story.
Okay.
Yeah.
A call and
Well, we're glad you're here. Stick around.
Yeah, John, you really should switch over. That would be my advice.
Stick around, and plus you can hear our station. Huh?
I'm taking a walk on the wild side.
Okay.
Stay on the wild side, John. Call us again. We really appreciate your first call. 877-301.
Here's the text.
8970.
So kids need a phone in case of emergency, but the emergency that ends up arising is one of poor attention, lack of interpersonal interaction, deteriorating mental health. Sounds like the cure is worse than the disease.
Well, by the way, those are kids. I am, as you have often criticized, I am like so obsessed with my phone. It's ridiculous. And when we're talking, I often, like not on the air, but I often miss a lot of what's going on around me. And I'm sort of an adult. I'm serious. I mean, so imagine, tamp that down to a 12-year-old or a 14. It's so obvious to me that it's a horrible distraction, especially in a pretty tough time for young kids.
You went to Blue Man Group last night. We're going to see.
We did. They're going to be with us next Friday. Yeah.
And did you see the skit in the middle where they had all the people walking with the cell phones?
Yeah.
Everybody had their cell phones in their face, and they're going down manhole covers and getting run over by cars and all this kind of stuff.
Now, if you have not been to Blue Man Group, you should say the one thing that is terrorizing is you sit in the audience, and it's an audience participation show, and you worry they're going to call on you.
That's right.
Were you not
I thought of you because you were at the end of the aisle. I was on the other side.
Oh my God!
But I thought they're going to call on him. They're going to call on Jim.
And they take you up on the stage.
And they took this adorable lady, looked like a little grandmother, and she was a riot.
She was great.
And she had to be mid-70s or maybe even 80. And the Blue Man Group guy, when she was sitting up there, what did they take out of her? The present they gave her?
Handcuffs.
Instead of handcuffs.
Exactly. And she liked them, by the way.
She handled
Let's
it
go
well.
to Tom in Shrewsbury. You're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome. Hi.
Hi, Tim and Marge. Good morning. How are you this morning?
Very well. Thank you for calling.
So I've been in Massachusetts about 20 years, but I grew up in New York City, and I just wanted to sort of throw two little stories at you.
Sure.
I took the bus to school every morning, and this was in my middle school year.
Mm-hmm.
Probably about over a mile. I walked myself to the bus station.
Mm-hmm.
I got on and off. My parents would never know if I made it to school or not. And when I would go home in the afternoon, sometimes I would walk, which could take an extra half hour to 45 minutes. And it was never, a need to set up the alarms at home if I was a little bit late. I think, parents back then just assumed that there was sort of a window of when the kid would get home a little bit. Mm-hmm. And you sort of learn to fend for yourself. But more so than that, my father took me on an exercise. We took the subway down to Times Square, and he said to me, Tom, it's on your own to get us home from here.
Whoa.
You can read the subway map. You can ask a police officer, but I am not getting us home, but I will be by your side.
How'd you do?
And, well, I'm still here talking to you, so that's a good sign, I guess.
I guess it is.
And luckily, I was on the east side, so I didn't take too many trains, but I did get us home. But and I've got 2 kids in their 20s who are, completely, they're so bright, but a lot of kids just don't have the ability to, look somebody in the eye and ask for help, or if they can't look on their phone, they're sort of frozen like during the headlights. And I think that ability to sort of think for yourself a little bit is something this generation has lost. Obviously, phones are a big asset, and everybody will always have them as they should. But I just want to weigh in those 2 little points.
I love those stories. Tom, thanks for sharing them.
That's great, and that's underscored by this story I've been quoting. Cell phones in class aren't making kids safer. Being ever available to solve your children's problems undermines children's ability to solve their own problems. It can even undermine their belief in themselves. After all, their parents don't seem to think they can handle an entire school day on their own, and for all that, the phones aren't even keeping them safer.
Forget school day. I moved to New York City to go to law school when I was 21. Mm-hmm. My mother was nervous whenever I went to Port Authority bus terminal by myself, and look what it's done to me.
That's right.
Exactly.
You're kind of an example. We should talk about the terrible tragedy of Jim Browdy as a reason. Okay. Coming up after a quick break, it's time for Live Music Friday with activist opera company White Snake Projects. Wait till you hear them perform. Stay tuned. You're listening to Boston Public Radio live at the Boston Public Library, and we're also streaming on youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Mordregan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. I would go to those places. If you're not here, you're going to want to see what you're going to hear in a few minutes. Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, joins us on the 14th in person from 11 to noon for Ask the Mayor. But it's time for Live Music Friday here at the library. Joining us now is Cerise Jacobs. Hi, Cerise. Nice to see you again.
Jim.
And Tien Hui Ung from the self-described activist opera company, White Snake Projects. Hey, Tien, it's great to have you here, too. They're getting ready to premiere their 2nd annual production of Let's Celebrate, 4 totally new English-language operas telling stories of joy, grief, family, and transformation across cultural barriers and divides. We'll warn you now, the window to see this production is small, just 2 shows, both on Saturday, November 18th. For more information and to get tickets, the website is whitesnakeprojects.org. And there's also a pre-show talk before curtain both nights. In a couple of minutes, we'll hear pieces from 2 of the operas. But right now, Cerise, Tien, great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah,
thank you.
We're so excited. Everybody's going to. We heard you performing this morning. It's going to be great. But I'm going to ask you. Let's start with you, Cerise. What is the story of White Snake?
What's the story of White Snake? Well, the name is based on the legend of the white snake, the most beloved myth in all of China. And I took the name for the company because I find the white snake to be representative of a powerful, strong woman, like this company is going to be, and is currently. And my very first opera that I created and commissioned composer Zhou Long for, Madam Whitesnake, won the Pulitzer Prize.
Yes.
And therefore, how can we leave the name White Snake? We've got to write on it.
Yeah, but tell us about the white snake turning into a woman and then going back to the snake.
Yeah, so the white snake yearned to be human so she could experience love. And she did. She badgered the gods for 1,000 years, and finally they succumbed and turned her into a woman. She married the love of her life, and authorities, they always get involved, don't they?
Cerise, I am so glad that you're here for a lot of reasons, including, you proved a theory that I've been saying to Marjorie for years. Every single major figure in opera was a former federal criminal prosecutor before. Is that not true?
Absolutely.
Like you, for example. Absolutely. Pavarotti, you, everybody, whatever.
And you too.
Hey, well, I'm not a criminal prosecutor. So, Tian, how'd you get involved in this thing?
Oh my goodness, you would not believe this. I attended a opera festival in Berlin, Germany, and went to an absolutely horrible opera.
Oh.
And then I thought, but it was supposed to be immersive, modern multimedia, and it was supposed to be futuristic. And so guess what? I put that into Google, and up came Cerise Jacobs' name with a TED Talk. And then I just...
Wait, what'd you put into Google? Horrible opera? Or what'd you
No,
put
I
in?
put futurism, immersive multimedia opera.
Wait, is that a true story?
Yes.
That is fabulous,
Yeah,
actually.
so I was in Germany, and then Cerise's name came up, and I thought, wow, this incredible woman, I wonder where she is. Oh my God, she's in Boston, where I am. So, and then I just kind of Facebooked her. So talk about like a complete 21st century meeting, and then that's
fabulous.
how we got to meet.
So tell us what Whitesnake does differently from any other opera company, Cerise.
Yes, well, first of all is our mission. We are totally and utterly committed to opera-based activism. I don't believe there's any performing arts company that can say that. So
what does that mean, first of all?
Okay, it means, that we do things differently. So for one thing, we only produce world premieres because we believe that the only way you can uplift the voices of historically marginalized communities is by using their voices to tell their stories. And that's why we commission BIPOC composers and writers to write their stories, reproduce that. Now, these are voices which would otherwise never be heard. And we deal with contemporary issues like immigration, domestic abuse, disability, religious pluralism, and of course, a big thing now because America is becoming more and more colorful, multiculturalism.
Yeah, and one other thing that I have to love, first of all, 10 years ago, if we had met, I couldn't stand opera. Now I've become a lover. But a perfect transition for me would have been what you do. Short bites of opera for the uninitiated. Explain that whole decision and why that appeals to you, Tian.
There are many levels to this. One of it is, what attention spans and what audiences are curious about. Especially if you're new to opera, putting you in a 5-hour opera in a seat like this, up there in the gods, is probably not the best way to do it.
Russian. In Russian. Italian.
Yeah.
In a language you don't understand, right? But then there's also the point that if our mission is to welcome new voices into opera, then they're coming from traditions of writing that's not maybe 5 hours long. Maybe they're songwriters, maybe they are jazz musicians, and so when we commission these new folks to join the world of opera and to write something, we want something that is also kind of manageable and a great way for us to mentor and partner with them, so that then they have a great introduction into the world of opera.
Where do you find the people who are not traditional opera composers to take these commissions and produce the work that you perform, Cerise?
Through a network, but believe it or not, Jim, right now they find us. So we're never at a loss for composers or performers, because we get emails all the time saying, hey, I work in such and such, I would love to work with you, here are samples of my work, can we talk?
Tian, what are we going to hear first?
The first piece we're going to hear is from Omar Najmi's Joduba Sopar. And this section here features Erin Mercurio Nelson as a soprano. And she is singing this moment where she references Khusro, a poet from her tradition, and the beauty of it. And it's some kind of amazing multicultural moment where, you know, it's just absolutely gorgeous. The music is flowing, and it's just enchanting.
Well, there's a little bit more to the story, though, I think you should share. Should there not, to the story?
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
First of all, the composer is Muslim, and he's writing about a young Muslim man who is at the breaking of the family gathering, breaking the fast at Ramadan. And he meets up with his friend whom he is in love with. And the friend announces, I'm going to be marrying a woman. So it is a heartbreaking moment for him in the midst of the holiday celebration. And he is then comforted by his cousin, who is Aaron, and through a poem, a very ancient poem. And that's what you'll be hearing.
Well, let's hear it. Here it is. Aaron, we're thrilled to have you, and we'll introduce the accompanist in just a couple of minutes.
Grandfather of Kavali, legendary Sufi poet with a legendary love affair with his teacher, Nizamuddin Auliya. Khusro premka ulti wakidar, chatra sodogaya joduba sopar. Oh, Khusro, the river of love runs in strange directions. One who jumps into it drowns, and one who drowns gets across. You feel like you are drowning now. Stop fighting it. You're already in the current. It won't be easy. The water will overcome you. But trust me, you'll be on the other side before you know it. And it's so much better over here.
Fabulous, just fabulous. Oh my God. Cerise, who's the accompanist?
Jamie LaRusso. Jamie.
Thank you,
hi.
Jamie, and thank you,
you.
Erin. That was fabulous.
You know,
that was great.
Cerise, Jacobs, Jim mentioned at the beginning that you were a former federal prosecutor or a trial lawyer. It is an unusual transition. How did that happen, that you went from being a lawyer, educated at Harvard Law School, to this?
Well, it's because of my husband, Charles, who is a raconteur and a rascal. And I miss him every day, even though he's been gone. And he didn't leave me in that sense, but he did leave in the sense that he died.
Yeah.
He loved opera. And, it was a natural, I know it sounds strange, Marjorie, but it's a natural segue because I was a trial lawyer, which was a sort of testing, honing ground for communication skills. So just imagine, see the audience out there? Pretend you're a jury. I need to convince you in the first 2 minutes. I need to tell the story of my case, convince you that I'm right and you should trust me. I'm an opera creator. Same principle, right?
So, Tien, what law firm did you come from?
The law firm of practical music.
Are you from Singapore?
I am also from Singapore.
And you have a Singapore connection, do you not?
Well, I'm from Singapore too.
So is that part of the deal between the two of you?
No, he contacted me from Berlin through Facebook.
But did that solidify the bond, or was purely the music and the mission?
It was partly music, and it wasn't the fact that we were Singaporean per se. It was the fact that we loved to eat. And all Singaporeans love to eat. We are omnivorous. It's a tiny little island. There's nothing to do except eat and do the other thing.
The other thing. Okay.
So, yeah.
But Tien, I also read you got a new album coming out, right?
I do.
And it was with a group from Ukraine.
Yes.
That's in the midst of this horrible tragedy. So tell us about the album and tell us about the Ukraine connection.
So this album is on the music of Thomas de Hartmann. And Thomas de Hartmann was a contemporary of Stravinsky and Rachmaninoff. And his story is that of a person who had to leave because of world conflicts, that with events far larger than himself. And I felt that, this was such a moving story because, that's the story that is shared by so many of us here in the US. And what happened for me was that I was conducting a concert and somebody came to me, this is almost like a fairy tale, with like a manuscript and said, there is this amazing music. I haven't managed to convince anybody to take a look at it. Would you look at it? And then I did that.
They're calling you because they want you to talk about the other thing. Do you know what I mean?
My God, I am so
That's okay.
sorry.
It's okay, sir.
It's okay.
We can survive. Go ahead, Tien.
Yeah, so, what happened was that I ended up being invited to Ukraine. This composer was of Russian nationality because, of course, that was the Russian Empire when he was writing, but he was from what is present-day Ukraine. And at that point, he shared both identities, right? He was really supportive of the music of Ukraine. I was invited there to, present the music of this rediscovered master from Ukraine, and was recording it. And it became this life journey that, completely changed my life because, then what happened was that we realized that the war was impending. And, it was very dramatic because there was one point where I was receiving the only files of the recordings of this music, the first recordings in half a century. And the whole point was that he said, well, they're trying to destroy our cultural heritage. I'm going to send you, through my cell phone reception, the original files. And this is it. If I die from this bombing tonight, you have it. And you have to get this music out.
So
what happened to him?
He thankfully survived, but for example, the orchestra's percussion instruments and pianos were bombed deliberately, missile bombed.
Oh my
gosh! And we worked to raise money to actually to unsilence the voices of culture and hope that they were trying to do.
Now, Tien, for those who are not watching on YouTube or Facebook, you're conducting all this. Who are the performers we're about to hear?
Yeah, we have on baritone. We have Joel Clemens, we have Jeanette Lee on mezzo, and we have Chelsea Baquet on soprano for the next number.
And quickly, because we don't want to miss any of this, what are they performing?
We're performing an excerpt from Tamale Dumpling.
I love that.
Which is this, as you can hear, a mishmash of two different cultures, and it's actually in a way our story, right? Because we came together through food. And so you're going to hear in the opera there was all this conflict about different cultures coming together and having distrust and misunderstanding.
Okay, why don't you join your fellows? Tamale Dumpling is about to be performed, and Marjorie in a minute is going to tell you how to get tickets for White Snake Projects on November 18th. And here it is, Tamale Dumpling. Welcome.
got a bowl and a wok. We're ready to rock.
I got a pot and a pan. We got a plan. Here we go.
First we make the filling. Pork, chives, chop, chop, chop. Soy sauce, spices, sprinkle on top.
Pork, chives, chop, chop, chop. Soy sauce, spices, sprinkle on top. Pork, chili, shred, shred, shred. Garlic, spice, more chili, red.
Pork, chili, shred, shred, shred. Garlic, spice, more chili, red. Mix it, knead it, stir, stir, stir. Use your hands, turn, turn.
Mix it, knead it, stir, stir.
Use your hands.
Turn, turn.
Hey, don't spill the flour.
Sorry, my bad.
Oh, you kids.
What's next?
Roll that masa. Masa, masa. Masa, 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 masa. Masa, 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 masa.
Circles, circles. Circle, 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 circles.
Masa.
Circles.
Masa.
Circle, 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 circle,
Masa,
circles.
circles.
Time to wrap. 包的饺子，包的饺子，包的饺子。
Wrap the tamale, wrap the tamale, wrap the tamale.
包的饺子，包的饺子，包的饺子。
Wrap the tamale, wrap the tamale, wrap the tamale.
Last step, time to cook. Use the wok.
Drop them in.
包的饺子，包的饺子，包的饺子。
Wrap the tamale, wrap the tamale, wrap the tamale.
Cook the 饺子
Steam the tamale.
Cook the 饺子
Steam the tamale, steam the tamale, steam the tamale.
Steam the tamale.
Cook the 饺子 Cook the 饺子
Steam the tamale.
Cook the 饺子
Steam the tamale.
Steam the tamale. Steam the tamale. Steam the tamale. Steam the tamale.
Cook the 饺子. Cook the 饺子. Eat the 饺子. Eat the 饺子. Eat the 饺子.
Eat the tamale
Eat the 饺子.
Eat the tamale
Eat the 饺子.
Eat the tamale
Eat the 饺子.
Eat the tamale.
Eat the tamale
Eat the tamale. Eat the 饺子. This food is so yummy, yummy in my tummy. Dumplings, tamales, yum, yum, yummy. This food is so yummy, yummy in my tummy. Dumplings, tamales, yum, yum, yummy. This food is so yummy, yummy in my tummy. Dumplings, tamales, yum, 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 yummy.
These dumplings are so 好吃
These tamales are deliciosos.
好吃太好吃
Qué rico, me encantan. Hey, I think we made a new dish.
It's called a tamale dumpling
A tamale dumpling, dumpling tamale, a tamale dumpling, dumpling tamale, a tamale dumpling, yeah, dumpling tamale, a tamale dumpling, dumpling tamale, a tamale dumpling, dumpling tamale, a tamale dumpling, dumpling tamale, a tamale dumpling.
Katie, next time you visit, be sure to bring Max.
A tamale dumpling.
Speaking with White
That was
Snake and
fabulous.
listening to White
Great.
Snake Project's
Wow.
executive producer, Cerise Jacobs, the music director, Chen Yui Ung, and listening
great,
to
you guys.
performances, listening to the performance from the upcoming productions of Let's Celebrate, 4 totally original English language operas for the holiday season. For more information and to book tickets for the November 18th performances, that's November 18th, go to whitesnakeproductions.org. Thank you so much for being here after the new news. Callie Crossley joins us here on WGBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com and GBH News, youtube.com and facebook.com/GBH News.
Auditor Diana DiZoglio wanted to sue the state legislature because its leaders refused to comply with the probe she launched of their operations. Campbell now says state law doesn't authorize DiZoglio to carry out such an audit, and that a lawsuit would be unnecessary and inappropriate. DiZoglio, a former lawmaker, disagrees. She says the Massachusetts legislature is one of the most opaque in the country, and she's backing a ballot question that would let her conduct the audit. Katie Lannon, GBH News 89.7.
Here's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. And I want to make a correction. I said before, if you want to get tickets for the great music we just heard on November 18th, it's whitesnakeprojects.org, whitesnakeprojects.org. And that is November 18th.
They were fabulous. And before
Amazing.
November 18th, on November 14th, Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, will be here at the library for Ask the Mayor. It's a week from next Tuesday. One other little footnote. Yesterday, we had Lydia Bastianich on, who is just, talk about another explosion of energy like Cerise a couple of minutes ago. Aiden did a great little cut down of a piece of that interview. You should check it out at youtube.com/GBH News. It's really good. In any case, joining us now is the very busy GBH's Callie Crossley. Callie is the host of Under the Radar with Callie Crossley. You can catch that Sunday nights right here on 89.7 at 6. That's 1. 2, you can also hear Callie commentaries on Mondays for GBH's Morning Edition. And 3, she is co-host for I can't believe this is actually happening.
Yeah.
For GBH's brand new show launching at 2 o'clock today. The Culture Show. This is unbelievable. Congratulations.
Thank
and hi.
you.
How are you?
Hi, how are you? Hi, Marjorie.
So give us some clues. What are people going to be hearing in the next few weeks?
Well, initially it will be on Fridays, and that's the weekend review. So we're literally looking back through the week and picking out certain pieces that we think bear some discussion.
I love weekend reviews.
Because, but we're looking at it from a cultural standpoint. So what are the cultural moments, events, people, local projects that need to be discussed and talked about as we will.
Can you
in
tell
our
us
discussion.
what one of them's going to be today? You want to keep it a secret?
I'll let you beat up on Jared.
Okay.
Well, Jared, that's right. Is also
okay.
going to be with us a
Yes.
little bit later, and along with Edgar B. Herrick III today at 2 o'clock, following us on. By the way, so I assume, just so I understand what the concept of the Culture Show is, for example, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
I assume you'll be discussing what Sam Bankman-Fried listens to when he spends the rest of his life in jail.
Yeah.
What kind of music the scam artist extraordinaire.
Well, he'll be there 7 years, so if it becomes a cultural phenomenon, then yes.
He may be there his whole life, actually.
Yeah, right.
He could get 110 years.
Right.
So Sam Bankman-Fried,
4
Mr.
hours.
Crypto, the jury comes back in 4 hours, guilty on everything, all 7 counts.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then what I was interested in, because I was like looking more deeply at all the things that he funded along the way, as I discovered this past weekend at my Neiman Foundation reunion that he also funded a journalism project, which I will not be revealing.
Oh,
it was a really good one too. It was a good one too. I mean, so the guy was like all over the place with other people's money, as it turns out.
Well, I think that was one of the things that initially was so appealing about him. He was going to fund, all sorts of projects that he believed in, get people off the ground. He was going to be funding politicians that he liked or journalism projects that he liked. So that did have a certain appeal before everything went south so dramatically.
Before he mixed up whose money was whose,
But this guy, you're right, he could spend, he's facing 110 years.
You know what always still gets me? Every time I read about him, I forget he's 31.
31 years old.
Yeah.
He's 31.
With his parents, who are pretty prominent people
Professors
in
at
the front
Stanford.
row. You know what? I'm sure you've had the same thought, both of you. When you have somebody young, like him, 31 years old, when the moment comes, and they've had absolute total freedom.
Yeah.
They've owned the world. Or somebody old, like Harvey Weinstein, who owned the world and could do anything, including abusive, horrible things at will.
Mm-hmm.
You ever think about the moment when they realize that it's very possible in the very near future they are never going to have a free moment in their life again?
I don't think they think about that.
You really don't?
No, I do not, because I think that would keep you from. You have to sort of
Living.
block out all of that stuff if you think that way. That would give you pause. And these people, I mean, he never had pause, so it seems.
Well, I saw the pictures of the where they lived in
Bahamas.
Bahamas.
Yeah.
It was like all glass, right on the ocean.
It's like a
this
communal
spectacular.
penthouse kind of
yeah.
thing.
I mean, they were living large.
Yeah.
He and his on-again, off-again girlfriend went up testifying against him.
And by the way, for those who didn't know, we should have said, we assumed everybody did. He stole billions of dollars from his crypto clients. And the issue that I've raised before, we need a crack lawyer to answer this question. Why is there not some liability? I know they've been sued civilly, some of them have, for the Tom Bradys and all the other celebrities that put their faces on television ads that convinced some people, at least, I was going to say to donate. That's what they did, to invest a huge amount of money in this total scam.
It could be that they were duped too.
Yeah.
Well, I think they have to do their due diligence, it would seem to me, or at least that even if you don't discover the truth, you at least, before you make a representation, this is a good place to plant your money, it seems to me that you have an obligation, a legal obligation, to at least check this thing out.
Get on the stand, just like Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr., and said even though they were, on the board or wherever, running their dad's company, they didn't know anything. I don't recall.
How do you think that's going for the Trump family?
I don't recall. I hope it's not going well.
I would say the difference in this is that very few people really understood crypto.
That's a good point.
And so I'm thinking, these people that endorsed it. I have some people that say to me, this is the new big thing. I can afford to, be out here, and this could be the new big thing. I want to be a piece of it. So I don't know where they're, you can assume that they were duped as well. If it could, in fact, it goes worse for them if you find out that they did deep dives into it and discovered, this is kind of shaky.
I don't want you on the Tom Brady jury. I want a guilty verdict in that one. We're talking to Callie Crossley.
So Callie Crossley, I was kind of disappointed in this, I must admit. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, has just said that the auditor, that would be Diana Zaglio, does not have the authority to probe the legislature.
Right.
And that even if she manages to get her efforts to probe the legislature on the ballot, she may face legal hurdles. And one of the reasons I was excited about this is because they've awarded a lot of what's the word for it? NDAs, thank you. For
Non-disclosure agreements.
Non-disclosure agreements up on Beacon Hill. They've done things that I would like to see scoped out a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I don't know where you are on this, but I was disappointed.
Well, it's interesting because I didn't know, because as Campbell says, there's constitutional limitations even, if she got a ballot question. So that's very interesting. And then I guess Bump weighed in, Suzanne Bump, and said there's just no room for her to be able to do this. So, yeah, there ought to be. I would like to know what's in the NDAs as well, because as no one knows better than DeZoglio, she was a part of this.
Yes, she had to sign one to get severance pay when she worked up at Beacon Hill.
So she knows of which she speaks in this situation. So there must be something that we're just not seeing about how one can find out about that.
Well, first of all, we will have the Attorney General on at some point in November. And we invited this morning the auditor back. She's been on the show. Last time she sang a song about her ballot question. So to be clear, she does have a ballot question. She's collecting signatures to mandate by statute that the auditor can audit the legislature. And as you said, though, Marjorie, Attorney General Campbell is suggesting even if that were to pass, there may be some constitutional limitations on what an auditor can do vis-a-vis
And I don't even know if it would come into an audit, but it's really disturbing on a basic level that in many situations you can't even find out how your state representative or state senator voted.
Right.
I mean, you're voting for people to represent something, and you have no idea if they represented that when the rubber hit the road. So to me, the legislature is cloaked in secrecy, despite what they say about putting all their information online.
Well, it comes down to the way that the Constitution is drawn about what her role is. So I don't know. What I think is interesting is DeZoglio strongly disagrees with Campbell's interpretation. And since I believe Campbell is the big interpreter on this, that's I have to say what? What can you do with that?
Well, she may be able to appeal. I don't even know what her recourse is on the ballot question, but we'll go to the source. We'll talk to Campbell.
Yeah,
we'll talk to DeZoglio in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, we're going to play some sound from you. This is a clip from a video posted by the Jewish Journal that Amy Schumer tweeted with 2 speeches by Martin Luther King Jr. on Israel and anti-Semitism. Here they are.
Israel must exist and has the right to exist and is one of the great outposts of democracy in the world.
My Jewish brothers and sisters said to me amid anti-Semitism anywhere, we don't need your support. We have enough Jewish power to deal with this problem ourselves. I would still take a stand against anti-Semitism because it's wrong, it's unjust, and it's evil.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, Bernice, criticized Amy Schumer. Tell us about this.
Well, because Amy played the clips in the context of her own statements about what she thinks should be happening. And they were very strong. And so what Bernice King, that's the daughter, said, listen, my father was absolutely anti-Semitic, as am I, but...
Against anti-Semitism.
Yes, what did I say?
Anti-Semitic.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Against
that's why Jim's here.
Right, thank you, because I'm twisting my words here. But she said he would be first and foremost about peace and asking for a ceasefire because he was against militarism. And, went on to give her some evidence of that and all that he had said over time. So, she said, what Bernice King was saying is don't expand where he was. He's very firmly against the kind of anti-Israel and anti-Semitic action, violence, all of that. That's clear. But with regard to bombing, she said that's not where he would be. He would want to have a ceasefire.
There's a larger lesson here. I have done a lot of things which I regret. I think the one thing I have never done, and you correct me if I'm wrong since we've been working together a long time, I don't do one of these. If JFK was alive, here's what is, I don't know what JFK would have thought about X. I don't know what the great Martin Luther King Jr. would have thought about Y. You can do your own interpretation, but don't represent that a major historical figure, for example, Republicans are always citing JFK on tax policy.
Right.
Amy Schumer's doing this thing with Reverend King. It's just a bad and inappropriate move.
Don't you remember the bracelets? What would Jesus do?
Yeah.
Yes.
He's been gone a while.
I know. I mean, I think the thing is that when you want to quote somebody like a Martin Luther King, he has enough stuff out there for you to quote him directly and explicitly about what he said.
And let it speak for itself.
Exactly. And then if you go beyond that, then you're going to get Bernice King saying, that's not what he would have wanted. So that was unfortunate, I would say.
We asked Chuck Todd this a week or so ago, and you're a big-time journalist too. Is it... This whole Israeli-Hamas thing is as hard to have public conversation about without lots of qualifications for people to not think you're X or Y is almost anything I can think about. Have you had the same kind of experience?
Absolutely. I mean, of course, it's very, first of all, we're the shorthand country to begin with. So we don't like complexity, and this is absolutely complex.
Right.
You cannot shorthand it, and that's just the bottom line for people who decide to do that, and then point big fingers at other people without factoring in the levels of complexity in it. You're already in trouble. It's very difficult to have a conversation without having it be a layered conversation and one that's nuanced. And there's different schools of thought. There are a lot of Israeli Jews who are saying, there are some of us who are not Netanyahu fans, who think differently. We don't get represented. Then there are others that say, yes, you do get represented, and there's this back and forth.
Well, I thought Chuck Todd also was very critical of everybody rushing to their Twitter page or wherever to criticize everybody else, saying it's like people in search of a microphone. They want to get in there, and it's like here we are in the United States, we're having little Twitter fights over this whole thing instead of.
And people who are that oddly you would say, like, why is the person who, somebody mentioned this, the head of a gym making a statement, Okay, I mean, that's fine. I mean, that's your right to do, but
Yeah.
it seems odd in the context.
Yeah, and you hear that
Yeah.
all the time. I mean, it is so complex, and you have to go back into the history. And people have been trying to do that. We had a long talk with Charlie Sennett about it.
Yeah.
I talk about the Daily all the time. They've done a great job. The New York Times podcast about this. Ezra Klein, who has another great podcast. But it's very complicated, and
you think you almost have to lay the. I think you do have to lay the groundwork anytime you get ready to talk about it. Here is what we know historically. Now, okay.
Yeah.
Now that you understand how many layers there are, here's where people are at this moment, and they come to their places legitimately. You know.
So this is kind of an upbeat story about the banners honoring Black women on Blue Hill Avenue. That's kind of cool. Tell us what's going on.
Well, this is a project that started a while ago and it's ended at the end of October, but it's a public art project that was inspired. Ed Gaskin was inspired. He's the organizer of it. It's called Black Women Lead. And he's the executive director of the Greater Grove Hall Main Streets. And he said he looked around and thought, there's not really any public art over here except for, what did he say, one painted utility box? And so he thought there was a way to bring this together where you could sort of honor.
Up the game a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. And also inform people about some of the folks who have done a lot of stuff. Now, there will be names in there that some people may know if you know some of the big names in Boston. But I like this. The Bay State banner pointed out Karen Miller, who in 1985 became Boston's first Black woman firefighter.
I didn't know that.
I had no idea.
Neither did I.
I had no idea. So that's, those are the kinds of names you'll be looking for.
You know what's analogous to? I loved when the Embrace was dedicated. That
Oh my gosh.
64 plaques
Yes,
to major civil rights figures.
Yes.
Some of whom, as you say, we knew, obviously.
But a whole bunch of people.
And you don't. And I think that's a beautiful thing, not only for them to recognize their work, but also to educate those of us who, as we say almost every day, don't know as much
And they're there forever.
as we should.
No, they're there. They're always
It's a
going to
great
be
thing.
there, and it's kind of a wonderful thing. One of my neighbors actually that had opened a daycare center. Julian Houston was a judge, and he opened a daycare center at the courthouse when he was a judge because he said it was difficult for children when mom and dad couldn't get a babysitter to have the children come in and have to listen to what their parents were accused of, and so he did that, and I thought that was a wonderful.
And he got one of the 64 or 60 whatever.
He did.
Great for them.
He's a wonderful man. His wife and children, they're a wonderful family,
great.
and it was just I don't think it was great recognition.
The kinds of contributions you don't know about all the time.
Exactly.
Or people forget or whatever.
Exactly.
So this is nice. So it's going to be colorful too. So, and there's so many of them. So you'll have a chance to, if you drive through there, to see a number of them each time.
You know what's going to be neat too? When they get down, well, it's sort of the other end of Franklin Park, I guess, but when they have that all revamped soccer stadium out there, that's going to be a great thing. I don't know where people are going to park to get to see the
I thought
soccer
you
games
asked
in
the women from the
Well, we
National
don't really
Women's
have an
Soccer
answer.
League.
It's
What
not
did
a
they
whole
say?
hell of a lot of parking spaces in Franklin Park. But anyway, I'm just thinking that
Maybe it
that
can be a shuttle situation.
but it's going to be a great kind of. You have the banners there, Blue Hill Avenue. You go down, you go down to Franklin Park. I don't know. It's kind of exciting. Turn of events.
Okay, can we speaking of turn events, we're going to do a little bit of a U-turn here. Can you get a camera on this, or is this impossible? I would like Callie Crossley to say, for the people at home or at work or wherever the hell you are, what is it that I am holding in my hand, please?
You're holding a scooped bagel.
And what would a scooped bagel be, Callie Crossley?
It's just a bagel
Can you
that
hold
has...
the thing up since the camera's on you, not me?
It's a bagel that has the internal parts of the bagel part scooped out.
Yeah.
Thus
the name.
Thus the name Scoops Bagel, which I'm pretty certain Panera Bread offers regularly around here.
I didn't know that, but there's a big debate.
Yeah.
Before we get into the debate, I have to say, we have some of the best producers who I've ever encountered on the show at the moment. And the fact that you were kind enough to allow one of our producers, Nicole, to scoop out the bagel for you was so generous on your part, Callie. I just want to say I really admire
thank you.
your whatever.
Thank you.
So, Nicole, you did an excellent job wherever you are there. By the way, did you ever hear of a scoop? By the way, they're acting.
I never heard of a scooped out bagel.
I have. It's, I used to. by the way, when I was living in New York City, and I go to the bagel place right by Zabar's, I can't S&S, S&H, H&S, whatever it was. This is what you do. You cut it in half, you scoop the damn thing out, you get the crispy part of the bagel, and you put the cream cheese on it.
Well, some people like the non-crispy part of the bagel, and I scooped out the inside, and I ate the inside.
Well,
so
it also
very
works
good.
if you're trying to just watch your weight, because as you know, bagels are not they're quite caloric.
Yeah.
So the Panera bread, the Panera ones, that if I'm remembering correctly, is because it's on the low calorie offering, which is quite delicious.
Really?
Yeah, because then you can put the avocado and the egg white and whatever, but you'd have less of the bready part.
Well, it's funny you say that, because there was a phase in the diet world, which I've been on and off my whole life, where the bagel was the perfect food until you found out it's like 500 or 600 calories with nothing in the damn thing. Now, speaking of scooped out, Marjorie likes the scooped out thing. Tell me if you ever met anybody like this. I'm not going to say who it is, and you just tell me what you think.
Okay.
I have a close friend who eats muffins. I love muffins.
Yes.
She never eats the crispy top of the muffin. She eats the bottom and gives other people, like me, for example, the top. Have you ever encountered anybody like that?
I actually have encountered people like that.
There you go.
Yeah,
it's not so unusual.
That would be you.
Jim.
What a surprise.
That is correct.
I know, but I do know other people who do that.
Really?
Again, because the top is,
crispy
caloric.
and great.
I know, I'm with you.
Okay,
Listen, I'm just saying that I understand that that's the calories live there.
Can I ask you one last question before you tell us what you're doing? Do you think it'd be inappropriate for me to ask Nicole, our producer, to break the muffins in half and give Marjorie the bottom? And it's probably not a good idea, right?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Well,
probably has
also
some
they're
other things to
softer.
do.
They're also softer. And if you
I don't know how you can live without the top, though.
Yeah,
There are some places that just sell the tops.
Okay.
I bake
muffin tops.
muffin
tops. That's
I
right.
have a pan that just does tops.
They have those things over there. What do you call them? The Kugelmans, or however you
We
say
can't.
that.
Nobody can pronounce
I can't pronounce it, but
They have them on Fridays.
the top is crunchy and the bottom
you
is
mean
really
the
soft.
Queenamons?
Yes,
Queenamons.
Queenamons.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're great.
I love them. Are
They
you
have them
kidding?
here on Fridays.
Well,
Newsfeed Cafe.
Newsfeed Cafe, and also, my neighborhood bakery, La Saison.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
La Saison?
Yes. It's
La
very
Saison.
delicious, those Queenamon.
Okay, so Callie,
Yes.
we know you're doing the culture show in exactly an hour and 33 minutes, so you better hurry the hell up.
Yes,
But
this is
beyond
true.
that, what else are you doing?
So Sunday on Under the Radar, we're doing my Latinx Roundtable, and we're talking about these resignations from the advisory board, protesting the change in the English language learners program for Boston school students, and it's pretty fierce.
8 of the 13.
Well, then another person resigned, so
Oh,
now
I
there's
didn't
only
know that.
4 left
Oh, really?
of the original committee, and there's some pretty heavy hitters in the group of people who resigned, so a really important conversation. Then there's just another cultural snafu. The best-selling Spider-Man game, 2.5 million in 24 hours it sold, mixed up the Puerto Rican flag with the Cuban flag. People, as my people say, can you Google? So that's a big cultural snafu. Also, we're doing our book club pick, which is called Biting the Hand, Growing Up Asian and Black and White American. It's a very good book by a young woman who's talking about the feeling of being in between.
Sounds like a great show. By the way, we should say about the culture show, for those here at the library who are saying, how am I going to be able to catch it? We will broadcast the show at 2 o'clock today live here at the library. So if you want to stick around the Newsfeed Cafe and hear Callie and Jared and Edgar do their premiere show, you can do it. One last thing that relates to our discussion. The auditor, Diana DiZoglio, will join us here at the library next Friday at the Boston Public Library. And again, sometime in November, we'll have the Attorney General, so we'll hear both sides of this. Good luck, Callie. We're really excited about the show.
Thank you very much, Callie.
Thank you.
I'm glad Callie told us how to pronounce Queenanon. Queenanon.
Well, she obviously
You
didn't.
never watched the British Baking Show? My goodness.
Well, I have watched it. That is the most soothing
That's
show
one of
on
their
television.
premier pastries.
Have you seen the life-size Paul Hollywood?
Yes.
You have? Okay.
Of course.
Okay, fine. Sorry.
Of course, Jim.
It's in the studios, the radio studios.
We've been
back in
speaking with
Britain.
Callie Crossy. She's hosted on the radar with Callie Crossy, which you can catch Sunday nights right here on 89.7 at 6 o'clock. You can hear Callie's commentaries on Mondays, for GBH's Morning Edition. And starting at 2 today, Callie's co-host of GBH's The Culture Show. Thanks a lot, Callie. Coming up after a quick break, former Massachusetts Secretary of Education Paul Revell. We're going to talk to him about something Callie just mentioned, the new approach to teaching bilingual education in Boston, very controversial, and more claims of racism in Everett. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News and Facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. November 14th, 11 to noon, the mayor is here for Ask the Mayor, obviously at the library. That's Michelle Wu. We're joined now by Paul Revell. Paul is the former Massachusetts Secretary of Education, professor at Harvard University's Graduate School of Education, where he also runs the Education Redesign Lab. His latest book, co-authored with Lynn Sachs, is called Collaborative Action for Equity and Opportunity, a practical guide for school and community leaders. Hello there, Paul Revell.
Hello, Jim and Marjorie.
Good to see
Hello,
you.
Paul
Very
Revell.
photogenic jacket, I should say.
I know.
That
Thank
is
you.
really
Very
good
nice.
on TV. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Or
Love it.
especially for our appearance here at the Boston Public Library. Maybe you
Exactly.
can inspire Jim over there
Ha.
to kind of, break out of the box.
I'm comfortable, Marjorie, okay?
So, Paul Revell, let's start with yet another disturbing story out of Everett. There's been a lot of charges in Everett in public official life of racism and sexism. Now we have the school committee putting a woman of color on leave despite getting big support from teachers, students, and other superintendents. So what is going on?
Well, I mean, this has been a saga that's gone on for some time. The mayor has had his back up about the superintendent, who's a very independent woman of color, who, as far as I can see, has been a superb superintendent. She's been recognized by the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents as an outstanding leader. She's got very positive reviews from students and teachers within the school system. But she has the disadvantage of being an independent thinker and not part of the old boy network in Everett. And she's run up against that network, and the mayor has made it a kind of a cause célèbre, I think, to move against her in a variety of ways. She has countersued. They've had 3 special meetings in the past 3 months when that school committee hasn't had a special meeting in 30 years. And they've got some evidence that that just really looks thin relative, and she hasn't been given due process, and they've now suspended her. They earlier terminated her contract as of the end of this year. So I think this situation begs for review by state authorities. Honestly, I really think this is out of hand. The district has got a really poor track record in terms of past superintendents and what's happened in Everett. So this is another case of Everett getting off the tracks as far as I can see.
By the way, the past superintendent, let's not be euphemistic, Frederick Forestieri, she replaced the superintendent in question. He was accused of assaulting women who worked for him multiple times, pled guilty to 2 counts of assault and battery earlier this year.
And went to jail.
By the way, she's going to be the superintendent who was just placed on leave. He's going to be with us sometime next week. We don't have a date yet. But if we can just talk about Everett for a second, which is beyond education. We talked a lot about it. We had a Gurley Adrian on, who was the city councilor, ran for mayor. She didn't win. whose screen was shut off, allegedly on orders of the mayor. The mayor's chief of staff urged a former city council, I don't know if he's back on the city council, DiPiero, to bring one of his dark friends, was her quote. Her name is Deanna Devaney, to a political event to show they weren't racist. DiPiero, who is a cousin of the mayor, talked about inviting black people to events as a way to fend off allegations of racism. And the thing that's even more troubling to me than the obvious racism under Mayor DeMaria in Everett is, do you remember when we were talking about these things a lot? The only people, every public official in Massachusetts talking about racism in other parts of America, nobody wanted to talk about Everett. The first person who mentioned it, then Attorney General Healy, said that DiPiero had to resign. The next day, he resigned. Rachel Rollins, then U.S. Attorney, started an investigation. But this is obvious, in my opinion, racism on so many different levels in a community a mile away. And leaders of this state have got to pursue this. This is a real nightmare. It's a cauldron of racism, in my opinion. And again, we're going to speak to the former superintendent later this week. What avenues of appeal, other than courts, does a superintendent have if he or she suffers this?
Well, I mean, she's taken her case to court. In this instance, she's been put on leave by a vote of the school committee who's chaired by somebody who works for the mayor. So I think she's got all kinds of due process complaints she could bring as a result of this. So I don't think the community is done with this case. They've got an election coming up too, and one would hope that the school committee, people voting for school committee, take this debacle into account.
By the way, you mentioned there was not a lot of detail. Last thing I'll say about this, in the alleged allegations against her, and I believe the Globe reported that when one city councilor wanted to go into executive session so she could see what the actual allegations were and who made them, in executive session, her motion was denied.
Yeah, there's no details, no names, not even the positions of the people who made this allegation.
And this was the first the superintendent had heard about any of this. She never had a chance to see these allegations in the first place.
Well, we're really looking forward to talking to her next week. And
I think it's great that you're putting a spotlight on it. I find it puzzling, as you do, that the state authorities have not stepped in here, but it begs for attention.
Well, generally, we're better at criticizing people far away. I think that's probably
Wait a second.
true.
Speaking of state authorities, is there a role for the Secretary of Education or the Commissioner in this?
Well, I think there's a spotlight. Frankly, I think this is more in the Attorney General's purview than in the Department of Education.
We'll talk to her. Okay, fair enough.
So we've talked a lot in Boston about the deplorable condition of some of the schools, bathrooms not working and stuff, and that's one of the big points that the state has been after Boston to do. Tell us what they did in Baltimore.
Well, I mean, the Globe ran an article on an extraordinary movement in Baltimore, but the city of Baltimore and the state got together and made an agreement that the state would step up and provide some very substantial funding in addition to what the local community would provide if the school system would agree to close a fair number of undersubscribed schools. And they did so, and then they did a whole rebuild that, they're a school system like ours. They have a lot of old buildings that haven't had sufficient refurbishing and were in trouble, but they couldn't raise sufficient money to do it, nor could they close schools because it's so hard at the local level to close schools because people are attached to their particular
They've tried it
school.
over and over and over in Boston, and oftentimes the decision gets rescinded.
That's right.
Yeah.
And by the way, the reason this is a critical part of the Baltimore thing, because of the savings that came from the closings were applied.
That's right, to being able to maintain a new physical plant. And so you had a combination of state aid, but state aid as well as state cover for closing the schools. So now when you had a mandate, you had all this funding depending on it, the city was able then to move forward under state supervision and close out the schools. And that was really, there was no question that had to happen in exchange for then the state financing, a beautiful new building plan for the city.
Is it fair to say that in this state, what's the name of the entity that makes the decisions?
The School Building Authority.
The School Building Authority. Did that report to you when you were secretary, or are they independent?
No, they're an independent entity.
Is it fair to say that they fund more schools in wealthier locales like suburbs than they do in inner cities?
Well, I'm not sure that's fair. I mean, they provide disproportionate levels of support in urban communities. There are way more suburban communities or rural communities, of course, than urbans. So probably on the face of it, they probably do more there. But the urban communities are very dependent on this funding in order to do building.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, Proposition 2.5 overrides in a lot of suburbs go toward a new school.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's harder to get those in the cities. I mean, Boston has a lot of property wealth, and Boston is, relatively speaking, wealthy from the standpoint of a school district compared with a lot of the other, the gateway cities and other cities around the Commonwealth, which really depend on that funding.
Can I ask you a question, Marjorie, about this? I don't remember who the guest was, but we were talking about a climate issue. Like a lot of the new school buildings
air conditioners
had air conditioners, right, as opposed to energy, climate friendly.
Well, they put a bunch of them in there for the air quality.
But was that because of the cost? I can't remember. Do you know the answer? Was that?
Why did they put in air conditioners?
Yeah, in new buildings.
It was because of the heat in the.
No. I understand that.
Oh.
When they're building new schools, why were they not doing climate friendly?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the answer.
Okay, I'm not sure.
I don't know the answer to this either, but I've been dying to talk to you about this. We just talked to Callie Crossley. She on her show Sunday night at 6, is going to talk to people about this change in how bilingual education operates in Boston. A lot of the people that are involved in this are very, very upset. They resigned their positions. The superintendent has defended this. And what I understand to be is instead of segregating kids who are speaking a different language and spending their whole day in those with that different language, they want to integrate kids, have a part of the day they're in their native language, and then go in with the English-speaking kids as a way to get them to speak English faster. Is that what they're trying to do?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that what we have here is a sort of an age-old argument in this field between, total English immersion on the one hand, and on the other hand, transitional bilingual education. And the two sides have been fighting for a long time about this. Also, the state has stepped in, so this makes it sort of a complex three-part negotiation. The underlying problem is we're not serving English language learners very well, and the population of English language learners is going steadily up in the Boston public schools. So the state, appropriately, in its order to Boston to come forward with a school improvement plan, has said you've got to make a priority on better serving English language learners. You have a commission that's been around, I think, for 18 years, this commission. It's a long time. For a particular commission to be in place. There are a lot of highly respected individuals on that group. They're raising questions about, the degree to which we need to have young people who come in and don't have facility in English in separate classes initially, and then eventually get integrated into the system. The school system is not opposed to that. I mean, the state has felt that the ELLs were overly segregated in structured English immersion now as it is. And as I understand the school's plan, it's in the sort of gray area between these two poles. They don't want to put anyone who doesn't have facility in English directly into an all-inclusion plan. They also want to make this a kind of a decision that gets made at the school level. Different schools have different populations at different levels. And something we're not talking about is the ability to attract teachers. I mean, finding teachers to do this work is really important. And we're in a period of staff shortages and acute shortages in areas like having bilingual teachers. This inclusion debate is something that we've had for a long time, for example, in children with special needs, of which I'm a parent of my child. And a lot of school districts have felt, okay, we can do inclusion very quickly and easily and cheaply, but in reality, to do inclusion properly, you need multiple teachers in the classroom. So if you're going to integrate special needs children and English language learners, each of those needs a teacher in addition to the regular teacher and an aide who's probably going to be there.
So is that what's driving the decision here, the lack of adequate
Well, I think it will affect the pace of implementation. I think the school system, look, most of the time when we get into these sort of dichotomized bipolar arguments and debates, which we're famous for in education, the truth is somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Total immersion and inclusion and, separate transitional bilingual. And I think the district is moving in that direction. and providing the opportunity to local districts, to local schools and parents to make a decision about the pacing of that in accordance with the resources and teachers they have available.
Let's hear from the superintendent before you ask your question. Here's what Mary Skipper, the superintendent in Boston, obviously, said when she addressed the resignations at the Boston School Committee. This is on Wednesday.
First, on behalf of the district, I would like to thank the members for their years of service and deeply appreciate their advocacy for Boston's multilingual students. Second, I want to acknowledge that the status quo, I think we can all agree, is not working for our multilingual learners based on decades of data and DESE's guidance. We know from our most recent MCAS results that our multilingual learners are 5 times less likely to be reading on grade level than their peers. The data is clear. We must change the way that we are serving our multilingual learners.
Here's what I wonder, and I asked you this before because your kids and my kids went to the Brookline schools, where at least when my kids were there, they did segregate kids of different, they were mostly Russian kids in my kids' school. They were in a Russian class for part of the day. Then they went in with the other kids, the idea that would help them kids learn quicker. I don't know if that's true or not, but they've certainly been doing it in other places that way.
Yeah, well, and I think Boston has too. I mean, for example, right now, they don't take a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old and put them right into an all-inclusion kind of situation. They need, some separate instruction beforehand. Right. So we have to differentiate. I mean, this is something that, has been a hobby horse of mine for a long time. We've got to treat students differently depending on their different needs. And so I think what the system is proposing is a more complex model. So it's not so black and white that it's all inclusion or all separate.
So why this dramatic, people are so upset about this, they're resigning.
I don't know. I was kind of surprised at it myself because, anybody who knows Mary Skipper and her long history in the public schools, her commitment to equity, cannot doubt that she's trying to solve this problem that she just described. Linda Chen, who's leading this effort for them, is a English language learner herself and went through the system in that way. So these are smart, very well-intentioned people who are coming up, I think, with a plan here that, if given the time, will meet the concerns that have been raised by people on the panel. I think the panel, again, it's been in place for a long time. I think people are exhausted and wanted to change the music.
One last thing, at least for me, about this is one of the things that was always so terrible, I thought, years ago, was that you had kids graduating from high school in their own native country's language, and then they couldn't read and write English well enough to get jobs when they get out of high school, presuming they weren't going to go to college, and then they weren't going to be able to get into classes because they're overrun. The English is a second language classes. So I guess, how does it help a kid coming from Russia or wherever they're coming from if they don't learn English before they get out of high school?
Well, no one's going to argue that it's good. No matter what side you're on, no one's in favor of a kid getting out of high school in America not speaking English.
But that is what happened. That is what happened before there was more of a
Well, I think
mix.
that was why there was a backlash.
Yeah.
And then we went to the opposite extreme. So we said everybody's got to be in structured English immersion. You've got to all be in inclusion right off the bat. And in fact, the state is citing and saying that's not a good way to do it either. And we had the Look Act in 2017 to change that law that was passed with a kind of overheated referendum that we did a long time ago that said everybody ought to learn English and therefore we ought to put everybody in,
that was Mitt Romney, I think,
immersion.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, Paul, you're sort of in the belly of the beast at Harvard in terms of wealthy donors trying to. No, I mean it is. And since
Paul's not a wealthy donor, as far as I know.
No, but since the murders in Israel and then the retaliation and the effort to get rid of Hamas and obviously the thousands of deaths of innocent people that have ensued, a lot of wealthy donors are trying to affect decision-making on campuses. And I have to say, as somebody who doesn't think about these issues a lot, my kids were in public school, I thought about them a lot, but now it's sort of only when you show up. If I were you, who think about education things a lot, regardless of the position of the donors who have been loud and attempting to affect decision-making in a university, I'd be really troubled by the fact that they are trying to do that. Are you?
Well, I guess I'm not surprised. I mean, this is a very painful time on campus. We're accustomed to making statements at universities about things like George Floyd's death, which pretty much all of our constituencies are going to support a statement of outrage on an occasion like that. This is an instance of a global event about which members of our various constituencies on campus and off are deeply divided. So the business of trying to find what the middle ground is quite difficult. I've led institutions before. I know that people want voice, and people who donate to you are going to get voice. They're not going to get official authority with respect to making decisions on campus, but I think it's naive to think that they're not going to have influence or they're not going to have access. I mean, look at the U.S. Congress and look at the way the country is governed. People who have money get access.
Yeah, but there's a big difference, if I may. I would assume that most of members of Congress who are owned by different interests, when they get a $10,000 contribution to their PAC, say, I'm going to do exactly what you want, and thank you for the money. I hope that Claudine Gaze, the new president of Harvard, and all the other presidents, the president of my alma mater, University of Pennsylvania, who a lot of people are asking
she's under fire now
to step down, to resign, say to a donor, I can't thank you enough for your $30 million, but I want to be clear up front, you in no way will have any impact on decision making about what we do on the campus.
And I think that's the case. I think that's the assumption, if not an outright explicit statement to people. But at the same time, you're sensitive to constituencies. But the larger problem here is our financial model in higher education is broken. We're way too dependent on donors, and that therefore gives donors a disproportionate share of voice.
It's almost 50% of the cost of an education at Harvard, isn't it?
Well, it's coming from philanthropy, yeah.
Yeah, from philanthropy.
Yeah.
So what does one do? What is in the forget public sector, where obviously we all believe that states should be supporting places like UMass and the community colleges more. What is the solution on the private?
We need public sector policy that provides more government assistance with respect to the finance of higher education, both in public and private sector. I mean, other countries have figured out how to do this long ago, and they see it as an investment in the future of their economy.
Even in the private sector, even in the
private sector, yeah, making through vouchers, through. We have Pell grants that people can take to private schools and things of that nature, but they're minimal. And we've got to solve this problem because we're making it less and less attractive for people to go to college. College enrollments are going down, while in other countries they're making it more and more accessible for people to get the education they need to drive an economy in the future.
One last thing for you, and I don't mean about the individual, even though I'll mention the individual, but in general, Claudine Gay comes in. The vast majority of the world knows nothing about her. Obviously, the Harvard world does. And all they know about her is that Larry Summers, the former president, criticized her for not speaking quickly enough. A lot of big donors pulling out, that sort of thing. How easy is it to recover? I hear she's a woman of colossal skill. I don't know her. How often, when you start that way as a university president, do you make it? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think this is a real test, unfortunately, a huge test very early in her tenure. But she's very well respected. She is a highly skilled individual. She's got a lot of smart people around her on her board of overseers and so forth who are helping her, the faculty's behind her. So I'm confident that she's going to be able to make her way forward. But, Larry Bacow didn't have an easy term either. The way he had COVID and everything. They all face major challenges, and it's particularly intense at Harvard. But I'm confident she's going to be able to move us forward.
Paul, nice to see you. Paul Revel.
Wasn't the guy, Neil Rudenstein, wasn't he exhausted on the cover of Time magazine or Newsweek or
banner
something?
headline, exhausted, capital letters. Right.
Yeah. I'm sure she is already, and she's only a couple months on the job.
Yeah, not the look you really want, though, is it? No, I don't think so. Anyway, we've been speaking with Paul Revel, former Secretary of Education and professor at Harvard University's Graduate School of Education, where he also runs the Education Redesign Lab. His latest book, co-authored with Lynn Sachs, is Collaborative Action for Equity and Opportunity, a practical guide for school and community leaders. Thanks a lot, Paul. Coming up after a quick break, GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. He's going to zoom in Why is he zooming in? Because he's at our Brighton studios doing a countdown for his brand new Arts Roundup Culture Show that's going to start at 2 o'clock today. So Jared's going to talk to us via Zoom. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browding, Marjorie Egan, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. November 14th, 11 to noon. The mayor is here at the library. And I would like to announce, Marjorie is not only eating the Jim sandwich at the Boston Public Library from the Newsfeed Cafe. What'd you say about it?
I thought it was very good.
Very good. Thank you.
Like a lot of meat in there.
Outsells
it's a very,
the Marjorie every day.
Well, I think it's the other way around,
Whatever.
actually,
I mean,
Jim.
it's not that important.
Okay.
In any case, we're joined. This is incredible. An hour and 4 minutes from now, Jared Bowen has this major moment with Callie Crossy and Edgar B. Herrick III, and he's hanging out with us. I mean, really.
Well, he's on Zoom.
Okay, whatever.
He's not really hanging out.
He's the executive arts editor, but much more importantly, as of 2 o'clock today, host of GBH's The Culture Show, broadcasting Fridays for the next month, 2 to 3, right after Boston Public Radio. We'll broadcast it live at the library at 2 o'clock if you want to stick around. Hey there, Jared. How are you?
It's great to be with you both.
What happened to him? He was just on Zoom. Where'd he go? The line dropped.
Line
okay,
dropped.
fine.
Okay, we're doing well.
That's a good omen for your show there, Jared. Let me tell you.
Exactly.
Hang it up.
Okay.
All right, I'm going home now.
So we asked Callie Crossy what you were doing, but we're going to ask you to give us the lowdown on the Culture Show.
Well, as we have talked about, every Friday is our Arts and Culture Week in Review show. So this week there is so much to talk about. Of course, there's the new Beatles song. There is the MFA returning a piece of art that they have determined to be looted. We're honoring Robert Brustein, a legend in theater.
I met him once. Yep.
We're talking about Matthew Perry. People still are just processing that loss, of course, in Friends.
The reaction to his death, he was only 54, has been massive, hasn't it?
Like top of the New York Times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it? Was it the Friends show, just his great character, Chandler? Or what's your analysis?
Oh, you're trying to get me to give away all what I'm going to say on the Culture Show. But I do have lots to say. I do have a very personal connection into this, too. Not that I knew him, but but we'll talk more about this
we'll
at
have
2
to
o'clock.
tune in to get the scoop.
I've been saying to you for about a week, mostly off the air. I am more nervous about your show than you are. How are you as calm as you are with an hour to go?
You know, I am calm until I talk to you every time. Seriously, when we talked last week, you said, "Why aren't you nervous?" When we talked this morning, you said, "Why aren't you nervous?"
I did say that.
Jared is a professional.
He is. By the way, in all seriousness for a second, I know I speak for Margaret. We are really excited about this and really looking forward to 2 o'clock today. And by the way, starting in December, it will become a daily show, Monday to Friday, right after Boston Public Radio. So good luck today, Jared.
Thank you. We're looking forward to it.
So if you got the sound sheet there, I want to get right to the Beatles song. Is that okay? Can we go play the Beatles
he's not going
song?
to say much because it's on his show, but let's play it. Here is Lennon and McCartney, yes indeed, singing the chorus from the brand new AI-assisted song called Now and Then, released on Thursday. Okay, we're not going to ask Jared too much because they are doing it on the Culture Show, but we do have a couple of questions. Mark.
Yeah, we do. How this happened, please?
Well, this happened because John Lennon recorded this demo in the 1970s, and it was just him sitting at the piano recording himself. And of course, we know how recordings happened up until just really the last decade, where everything would be recorded together. But now we have methods of changing channels and separating them out. I'm back on the Zoom, by the way. I managed to do this while I'm talking to you.
It's easy for you to say. I don't see him.
I don't see him either.
We're trying to get there.
Are you there? I don't see you.
Yeah.
But back in those days, you could do this in such a way that the technology has changed so that you can separate out the tracks. And this is really super new technology using artificial intelligence. So basically, when Paul McCartney realized this, they realized that they had a moment where they could go back and record this final song.
There
and
he
include,
is. Hi, Jared.
There he is. Oh, he's looking pretty good.
And I'm in your studio, by the way. I'm sitting in your chair.
It's full of
I'm
crumbs.
happy about that.
Crumbs and dirt. I would watch out, see if there are any mice
We don't want
running
to
around
preempt
in there,
anything
Jared.
you're doing, and I still have a little resentment that I'm not on your premiere show. But having said that, yeah, I watched the 12-minute video, which I assume you and a lot of people here have watched, which describes the making of this thing, mostly in McCartney's voice and how, well, whatever. People should watch a video and listen to it. I have to say that while I totally love the song, when you listen to the harmony of Lennon and McCartney here, it is so beautiful. It's incredible. Having said that, there's a piece of me, two of them are dead, and I know it's their actual playing. It's the original cassette from Lennon, AI altered only in terms of separating the voice from the piano. I know Harrison, before he died, I think in the 90s, it says, played the guitar and using him. So it's actually all four of the musicians playing. But is there a piece of this that bothers you, or am I alone in that, Jared Bowen?
No, and actually, I think it was watching the documentary that turned me over, and because I think I was a little bit critical how commercial is this ultimately, and when I saw the video and I saw what was happening and you saw them reunited, you can't help but feel something, and then I think you absolutely hear that too.
I couldn't agree more. Again, that'll be discussed in depth, among other things, at 2 o'clock today on the first edition of the Culture Show.
Okay, tell us about this run around to every private school in Massachusetts for the Holdovers, Jared. This is a great story.
This is a really good story. This is a film that's just opening in Boston today. It's called The Holdovers. It's directed by Alexander Payne, Oscar winner twice over for The Descendants, and I believe Sideways is the other one, but he did Sideways, he did Election.
Sideways is a riot.
And truly, Merlot sales plummeted after that. He killed the wine industry, part of the wine industry in California for a little bit because of that famous Paul Giamatti line in Sideways. But
wait, what did he say in Sideways? I didn't see it.
That he would never, Paul Giamatti's character says he would never drink Merlot. And then they just tumble downward after that.
That's great.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I mean, it's horrible.
But it's a lot of very funny scenes.
But go ahead, I'm sorry.
So this actually reunites Alexander Payne with Paul Giamatti, who plays a college teacher at a New England boys' prep school. And he has been charged with taking over custody of the holdovers, the kids left behind at the holidays who don't have a place to go home to, so they're stuck at school. And Paul Giamatti is the ornery, unforgiving teacher who wants to conduct their holiday vacation as if it's school. But ultimately, we find this cast whittled down to just 3 people. So it's Paul Giamatti, this professor. There is Mary, the school's cook, played by Davine Joy Randolph, who is definitely going to get an Oscar nomination here, if not win. She's grieving the loss of her son. She's just lost him to Vietnam because this is set in 1970. And then this young student, Angus, played by Dominic Sessa, and it's the 3 on this campus, and it's a beautifully told story. I was really struck by the fact that we have seen this territory covered before in School Ties and Dead Poets Society, the New England campus with the changing trees and all the boys together, but Alexander Payne finds a new way through this, and it'll be a real treat for anybody here in New England because it was shot mostly out in Western Mass at some of the various prep schools out there, and then here in Boston, including in the Greek and Roman galleries at the Museum of Fine Arts.
You know what's this story? I don't know how to pronounce her name. Is it Kai or Kay Quinlan, who was the location manager in the Holdovers and worked on Spotlight and a whole bunch of other great local films. The interesting part of the story to me, beyond the fact that the movie sounds terrific and Giamatti is a great actor, too, is she spent 9 months with the director scouting out nine months.
Deerfield,
going to school.
Do we list
after
them? Deerfield
school
Academy,
after
St.
school.
Mark's, Northfield, Mount Herman, Fairhaven Academy. Never heard of that.
To give it authenticity,
Yeah.
which I love.
Well,
you know?
and if you think about it, Alexander Payne's films have a tone. Whether it's The Descendants in Hawaii or Sideways in California, you feel those spaces, and you very much feel that here. He's also paying homage to his favorite time period in film, which is the 1970s. So it opens up with these 1970s graphics, and it's sort of got this grainy feel, too. And these buildings could absolutely, because they were there in the 1970s, it's of that time period as well. But speaking of that effort, you were just talking about location scouting. Here's something else they did. They scouted for their lead. Alexander Payne had 800 auditions to play the young student, Angus. He wasn't bowled over, not that he reviewed all 800, but he wasn't bowled over by what he saw. So you know what he did? He called around to the area drama departments in those prep schools, and that is how they landed their lead in this film. It's a fabulous story. So this is his first film, and he has a starring role.
Are you standing or sitting in my place or in Marjorie's? I hope it's Marjorie's.
I'm sitting in your... Why do you hope it's Marjorie's?
Because I don't like people in my space. I mean, good luck to you, but I just...
I'm going to touch everything,
What'd you
Jim.
say?
Look, I'm
You're
touching
Jim.
everything.
Look at the floor behind you, Jared, if you want to really see.
A few crumbs. Well, they clean them up, kind of thing.
Okay.
You know, I know this is going to sound perverse when we discuss what's going on in Littleton, New Hampshire. I am actually happy this is going on, not because I like what is happening, but in a couple of minutes, we're going to talk to Meg Woolhouse and Philip Martin, our colleagues, about this anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion movement by, I would argue, some extremist parents. Others might disagree. In Newton, well, that can't happen in Newton. Well, yes, it is. In New Hampshire, to our north, explain what's going on with the arts and LGBTQ productions and murals and whatever.
Well, this has all started with a mural that's on the side of the Jing Fong restaurant. So it's a private building. Yeah. The restaurant turned over their exterior wall to have murals painted. It's sponsored by North Country Pride. And they have 4 different pictures, and it's basically of landscape and flora, and there are birch trees, flowers. There's an iris which represents the Greek goddess of rainbows. So behind that iris, you find a rainbow. So this is all about growth, planting a seed, having it grow. Obviously, the rainbow is connected in this Greek way to the iris, but also, of course, suggesting support for the LGBTQ plus community. Well, what has happened here is you have a state senator and you have one person on the select board who has an epic problem with this, and she has described this as, she's disclosed her position as homosexuality being an abomination. She thinks there are, quote unquote, demonic hidden messages and demonic symbolism in these murals. And so she realizes and has recognized that you can't do anything about private buildings and what they may want to do in terms of public art. However, they do have a control over public art in public spaces and public buildings, and so she's trying to move efforts forward to not allow any representation of this kind in public art.
You know, I don't know if I realized I didn't finish my sentence. I'm not happy that that kind of pain is being caused in Littleton or this kind of pain being called Newton that we'll hear about in 10 minutes. The reason I quote, like it is because it disabuses those of us who like to pretend that intolerance like this only exists in faraway places, you know, in Alabama or some other southern state or the Midwest. It's right in our midst, and including in liberal enclaves like Newton, Massachusetts.
And it goes beyond this. So there's also a group there called Theater Up, which rents its space from the Opera House. Yeah. And their long-term lease is now in jeopardy. In fact, I think the partnership is going to be dissolved because they've had the audacity to present shows like La Cage aux Folles, which was, for people who've seen the film The Birdcage, this is the basis for the film The Birdcage. So they are really trying to clamp down on any efforts for LGBTQ plus expression in that community. But here's the ironic part. I have been there. It's a lovely town. It's a lovely small town. The main public art until this conversation started happening is a Pollyanna statue in the middle of the town just outside the library because the author of Pollyanna was born in that town. They have the Guinness World Record for having the longest candy counter. There's a lovely antique shop that I visited operated by two gay men, and yet this is erupting in the midst of all of that.
Just incredible. We're talking to Jared Bowen again in about 45 minutes. He and his colleagues will be premiering the new Culture Show, 2 to 3 Fridays on GBH Radio.
So we've got some stuff going on locally, and we decided to order it in the ones that are closing first so people have a chance to get out there. I believe the first one is this really cool Tide House.
It is.
Tell us about this.
Well, this is fun for me too because I run by it all the time, and it's significant that I'm running by it all the time because it's changing. Tide House is a piece by Eben Haynes, who is a local artist, a Foster Prize-winning artist from the ICA, but he has created this installation of a structure of a triple-decker, something, architecture and home that is very common to the Boston area. But it's perched at the end of Mayor Thomas M. Menino Park, just outside of the Spaulding Rehabilitation Hospital, so that the Boston Harbor is its backdrop. But this is really a commentary on where we are in terms of affordable housing and climate change. So he has pointed out that nearly all of Charlestown residents below the poverty level are in flood zones. And he has covered this structure that he's created in this wash that is slowly washing away. This is why I say it's significant that I'm running by it often, because I see now how it's changing. So it's revealing the interior. But also he marks where the high water marks will be in 2030, 50, and 70. So in this sculpture, this large sculpture that represents home in front of the water, you're getting a sense of where the water is going to be in our near future, and it is absolutely chilling.
What did you say about where the water level is going to be for people in Charlestown who are living at the poverty level? Did you say all?
Everyone. Nearly, they qualified as nearly all Charlestown residents below the poverty level are in flood zones.
Wow.
Because
Speaking
it's
of
right
that,
up against the harbor.
Have you seen,
Wow.
Marjorie talks about this every day, and she should. Have you seen David Abel's The Inundation District yet?
I haven't
About how
yet.
the seaport's going to be
see it.
underwater in
You gotta
about 10
see it.
minutes?
Yeah.
It is really spectacular.
And we're continuing to build there as if, no big deal.
15 million square feet yet to come in the seaport.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
And it's already flooding now when we get these torrential rains that are happening more and more from climate change. Okay, so what can we squeeze in next?
Well, there is an exhibition right now at the Boston Architectural College, right up the street. By the way, I should say, what I've just spoken about, that's free. This is free at the Boston Architectural College. Is this exhibition called Slowness, Banyan Park. And so what the Boston Architectural College has been doing in their street-level gallery space is honoring their honorary degree recipients with exhibitions. So this looks at the work of Todd Williams and Billy Chien, who created this sprawling complex in Mumbai for a consulting firm. It's in a 23-acre wooded property, and so you can see their architectural renderings, you can see samples that they brought forward, but what they're trying to do is, in architecture, is to slow people down. So the way they use light is extraordinary. They have created these wonderful screens that not only block out the wind and the rains and the sun, all of which can be extreme in Mumbai, but it also brings in these shadows. And so as you're walking down these corridors, you're met with the sun creating its own mosaic. They have intersections where people can meet people. They have kept trees deliberately so that people can encounter them. And it's this whole exercise in just slowing people down. You don't just have to build a box with the traditional corridors and just have people rushing from one thing to the next, but they try to create spontaneity. I think this is a beautiful exhibition for slowing us down. You also get the fabric samples and the tile samples, and you see how they very deliberately brought nature from outdoors in. It's a lovely exhibition.
One last question from me, Jared, because I know you got to go. You'll leave my area exactly like you found it, correct?
I will. I'll even take the gift I brought from Marjorie, and I'll put it under her side.
I forgot about this. Wait. We got to do this.
A gift from
you
Marjorie.
were in Kentucky. I have no idea why. The other
Secretariat.
day.
You
Wait a
sent me
second.
all
Don't
those
ruin
pictures.
this.
I already did.
He was at, what do you call that? Churchill Downs.
Yes.
And you brought something for Marjorie. What would that be?
I did. So I was so excited to be I love horses, and I was in Kentucky. I was at Churchill Downs, and they have they have the Kentucky Derby Museum, and I was walking through, and there was an entire exhibition just just about Secretariat.
Of course.
And so
how could it be any other way?
I saw this, I talk about it as if it's only a movie. So I saw the script for the movie. I said, you both, Jim, you were so cranky about this, but I sent you both the pictures of Diane Lane's dress from Secretariat, John Malkovich's suit. I did send a picture of Secretariat. And Marjorie, I bought you this little shot glass.
Oh.
A Secretariat shot glass.
Yeah. Oh, that had to cost you at least like $1.50. That's beautiful.
We have the listener Paul who sent my Secretariat coasters, so I can put my.
He's going to describe it to you. Do you want him to describe this beautiful glass?
Yes, I do, but I want to say it will match my Secretariat coasters.
It will.
My entire cocktail hour can be Secretariat laden.
It's incredible.
Okay.
Well, in case you ever forget, Secretariat's Times, it has Secretariat's Times for the Derby, the Preakness, and Belmont Stakes all in the back for the 1973 Triple Crown.
That is correct.
So I have one last
Secretariat
question.
has held those. Woo! Their Secretariat
What
at the
took him
Belmont
so
Stakes.
long?
He's held those records for 50 years.
No one
No
cares.
horses beat him in any of those races.
What were you doing at Churchill Downs, if I may ask?
Seeing the horses.
I'm asking him, okay? I mean, what was that? Why?
So I'm on the board of trustees for NATAS, which is the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, and we had a meeting in Kentucky.
Okay.
They have a big sculpture of Secretariat there too, don't they?
Care about
They
that
do.
either.
Yeah.
By the way, he's
right
a big,
at the entrance.
He rides horses like in Montana.
He does ride
or
horses.
something, or
Yeah, I just like the movie and I like the pictures. And someone gave me a Sports Illustrated this year. Sports Illustrated is full on the anniversary of Secretariat's spectacular
Can
win.
I ask you a question that I do care about?
Yeah.
Everybody who works here goes to a conference. We don't ever.
We've never been to a conference.
We've never been to a
No,
conference.
never.
Are we ever going to get to a
I don't
conference?
think so, Jim.
I don't think so.
But clean up your act and maybe things will improve.
Jared, break a leg. 2 o'clock today. We
we're
cannot
very
wait.
Excited.
Premiere of the Culture Show with you and your colleagues. Thanks so much, Jared Bowen. Good luck.
Thank you.
We'll be listening later on. I'll give you a full critique.
On waiting.
Thank you very much, Jared Bowen. We've been speaking with GBH Executive Arts Editor and host of GBH's The Culture Show, Jared Bowen. Stay tuned to GBH 89.7 after Boston Public Radio for The Culture Show's launch, its debut. It's right gonna, as I just said, after us, 2 to 3. 89.7 GBH. And
we're playing it here, you know.
That's right.
Edgar
If you
Behar
are
the
here,
third, Callie
you can
Crossley
stick
and
around
Jared.
and you can hear it over the speakers here. Thanks, Jared. Okay, after a quick break, GBH's Philip Martin and Meg Woolhouse join us to discuss their latest reporting on pushback against diversity efforts of all places in the Newton Public Schools. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy live at the Boston Public Library. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu will join us for an hour of Ask the Mayor here at the library on November 14th. Monday, we have a couple of things. We'll mention these to you later. One we've told you about, or about to tell you about. Marty Barron, former editor of the Globe and the Washington Post, has a new book about Trump, about his former boss, Jeff Bezos, and about the news business in general. He will join us. And we just found out the superintendent in Everett, who was just put on a leave of absence on a 7-3 vote, and her supporters believe it's all about retaliation and racism. She will also join us on Monday, and we're really looking forward to that. We're joined now, though, at the Boston Public Library by GBH's Philip Martin and Meg Woolhouse. Philip is the senior investigative reporter for the GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting. Meg is editor of Education, the Education Unit at GBH News, and they're here to discuss, I guess I would call it a deep resistance to diversity in, of all places, Newton, Massachusetts. It's great to see you both. Fabulous reporting. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you both very much for coming in. Really appreciate it. So, Philip, let's start with you. What is happening in Newton?
Well, what's happening in Newton is actually something that's happening around the country. There's sort of a pushback, if you will, a backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion. That notion and that policy that gained traction after the death of George Floyd in 2020, it's been around for a long time, but a lot of people began adapting DEI after the death of George Floyd, including in Newton, where about 500 alumni of the Newton Public Schools signed a letter that year, 2020, asking that the city of Newton and its schools do more to make Black, Latino, Asian students feel more welcome within its schools. And this effort to push back DEI gained traction around that same period, but particularly in the context of COVID. As grades started to suffer, as test scores started to suffer, there was people were looking for an answer. Why? Obviously, COVID was part of that answer, but they said it had to be something more. And so a group of parents decided that more had to be diversity, equity, and inclusion.
By the way, so at COVID, the test score declined, Meg, but also they had the audacity to add the word racial to their mission statement in the public schools, not just equity, but racial equity. That apparently was triggering for some of these parents too, yes?
Right, can you believe it? But when you try to talk to some of these parents about these issues in an overt way through an interview, they consistently go back to discussing how academics in the community has declined over and over again. And so through some really excellent reporting by my colleague Philip, we had emails and exchanges from parents groups where they specifically talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion programs as being responsible for these declines. And just to quote from one of the emails, if you don't mind, Newton schools are intentionally and explicitly putting a divisive view of race relations into every aspect of the curriculum. And then they go on to say, teachers are being trained to make lessons more relevant by teaching about white supremacy.
Wait a second. The first half is to make it more relevant, and that's a criticism?
Yes.
Of what the teachers are. Who are these people, Philip? I mean,
well, they've come under various names. The latest being Improve NPS, Improve Newton Public Schools, and it's important for us to state that not all parents who are concerned about academic decline militate against DEI in Newton. The school superintendent Anna Nolan has made this clear.
She's new, right?
She's new, and it's very clear in our research and our reporting that not all of these parents fit into one basket, but some do. Some, a small number do in fact see DEI as tantamount to non-quality or an erosion of quality, and have reached out to groups like FAIR. FAIR is a group called the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. It's an innocuous sounding name, but they largely are right-leaning. It's a group funded initially by Harlan Crow, the same individual who, of course, funded Clarence Thomas's various adventures and escapades and so on and so forth. And that was a red flag. Harlan Crow has traditionally funded far-right organizations. And though FAIR posits itself as a group that does not tolerate intolerance from the right or the left, it's largely, its goals largely are aimed at affirmative action and DEI.
You know, when I read your work, your collaborative work, I always hope when I'm reading it that it's going to be these marginal nutbags who are doing these kind of things. I know that's not your term, it is mine. But I hate to single this person out, but it's somebody I've heard a lot about through the years. One of the people who's attended some, I think, FAIR meetings is Jeffrey Flyer, who is the former dean of Harvard Medical School. Do we know what is prompting him to be part of this thing?
Well, he's had a lifelong affiliation with, or a career-long affiliation with some groups like the Heterodox Society.
What is
and
that?
Sometimes he takes, I think it's like a libertarian-leaning group, and he takes sort of these, controversial positions on issues. And he's done that, I think, at Harvard by asking them to re-examine some of their diversity efforts on campus. So he also is part of a group of parents in the group that don't have children in the system.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But want to weigh in heavily on what the Newton Public Schools should be doing. And I just note that a number of the people that we talked to...
For the prominent guy, or woman, I don't know, Janie Finkelstein, is that a man or a woman? I'm not sure.
It's a woman.
It's a woman. Yeah, she doesn't have her kids in the public schools either.
That's right.
So
That's right. And you
awfully
find that
upset.
again and again,
Well, it's like book banners. Don't read the book, just take the position. I'm sorry, Phil.
Oh, and they had also reached out for advice. This core group had reached out for advice to a woman named Ashley Jacobs, who says straight up, and there's no obfuscation, that equity and equality, or rather equity and excellence don't go hand in hand. It's impossible. She says they basically, it's impossible to have equity and excellence.
By the way, she's quoted in your piece. That's not
right.
rhetoric on
That's
a
right.
conclusion you're
she
drawing.
Says that.
She says it.
Yeah. And we should also point out that a group, she's part of a group called Parents Unite, private school parents who basically push back against equity efforts after, again, the summer of 2020. And one of those who are one of the people who's trying to basically improve the public schools, who has basically not only heralded DEI, but has pushed back against neo-Confederacy at Newton Public Schools in small numbers, group of students who were flying the Confederate flag when he first arrived in 2016. He's also pushing back against anti-Semitism. This is the principal, Henry Turner.
He's gotten death threats,
He's gotten death threats, that's right. Because once his name was put out there by FAIR and a group called Parents Defending Education, a Virginia-based right-wing so-called parents group, a lot of these so-called parents groups emerged again after the summer of 2020, both George Floyd and COVID. He received death threats, but he has also been pushing back against them and has been very working hard to include this multiracial, multi-ethnic group of parents and students in pushing toward equity and excellence within the Newton.
I want to just stay on this for 1
North.
second. Another example of where you disagree with a public official's position. We talk about it in Congress all the time, in the speaker's race most recently, and the language of that debate is threats, if not actual violence, perpetrated against an individual who's taking a principled position, even if you disagree. What's his full name, just so people know?
His name is Henry Turner, the principal of Newton North High School. That's right.
Do you know, we talked yesterday about Newton in a different context. Remember, Jim?
I do. Leaf blowers.
70% of the people in Newton had landscapers, and they were using those gas leaf blowers. They were driving each other absolutely insane. I don't know if there's a connection here.
No, there's no connection.
But I do wonder, Meg Wilhouse, where does Metco fit in to this whole discussion? Because Metco is a program, very successful program, well, at least in some people's estimation, where kids from Boston go to schools in Brookline, Newton, Cambridge, Wellesley. Well, I don't know if they go in Cambridge, Wellesley, et cetera. Where's that? Kids of color.
Well, I think we do know that Metco's expanding a bit, and I think that the effect on students of color is terrible. I think that they feel threatened. I think that Henry Turner has pointed out that he feels upset on behalf of his students because they're forced to learn in this climate where they're getting a lot of hate.
And of course, it's also important to point out that not all of the Black and Latino students at Newton North or Newton South or any of the other or the middle schools are Metco students. There's not a significant Black population in Newton, but there's a Black population in Newton.
I wondered. Do we know how big the Black population is in Newton?
It's fairly small. It's less than 5%.
Yeah.
But
they had a Black mayor not too long ago, Seti Warren.
That's right, Seti Warren, now
Didn't
at
he run for
Harvard
governor?
Kennedy School.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So, Philip, starting with you, let's get to what consider the better part of the story, is the other side, people who actually believe in DEI and tolerance, racial tolerance, are fighting back. Yes?
That's right.
What are they doing?
Well, there are a number of groups, but one that some of the parents we interviewed belong to something called Newton Upstanders. And they basically, when they first saw, for example, the invitation from FAIR, or from parents in Newton to come to a FAIR gathering, they were a bit mystified by the language. Again, a group calling itself a group against intolerance and racism, but yet the language that seemed to suggest that they were also anti-DEI. And so this group formed...
Jeffrey Flyer was there, by the way.
He was.
That's right, Jeffrey Flyer was there. So they essentially formed this group to basically protect, if you will, not only DEI, but also to push back against any number of isms, including anti-Semitism within the schools, and also to bring in a larger group of parents into their orbit. And so they are a multiracial, multi-ethnic group that also embraces LGBTQ rights. If you remember, there was a pushback against LGBTQ plus students last spring after Newton North held their annual LGBTQ day. Some people said they should not be happening in the schools. And
Really?
so groups of parents and students demonstrated on the Cambridge Common in support of this because a anti-LGBTQ group, again, many of them non-parents, had decided to hold a demonstration against them, but the counter-demonstration was much larger.
Well, that's good.
This happened last May.
You know, can I ask a selfish question? I'm doing a program, actually interviewing Keith Lockhart, a Newton resident, for an organization, a wonderful organization involved in the arts called Newton Community Pride. Last year, you remember this, I did Nancy Shern, who's the brilliant
right. Yeah, the
activist,
Make Way for
sculptor,
Ducklings.
Make Way for
Yeah,
just
sculptor. She's
terrific.
a neat lady.
A lot of the public officials in town are showing up at this thing. Where are they? The mayor, the state senator, where are these leaders? Are they leading on this issue?
Well, let me put it this way. The school committee...
That sounds like a no. It makes me nervous. Let me put it this way. Put it this way, Philip.
We have to assume they're being very careful, but the school committee itself voted unanimously against a parents' advisory committee that Newton improved NPS was attempting to create that would have advised the school committee advice that they necessarily did not want.
This is the anti-DEI people.
These are the anti-DEI people who petitioned this year to create a parents' advisory committee. And they held a very well-attended meeting, the school committee, about 400 people, an emergency meeting on March 28th. And at that meeting, these groups of parents who believe that academic excellence is on the decline in Newton, but also believe that DEI may be the culprit, they went before the microphone and attempted to make their case. Some of their arguments were well-reasoned. Almost no one mentioned DEI in their comments, but most of the parents who were there opposing this felt that they were, in fact, implicitly targeting DEI.
And I'll also note that...
And the school committee voted against this parents' advisory committee unanimously. Sorry, Meg.
That's right. No, and other communities have these parent advisory groups. There's one that exists in Dedham.
That's right.
Where the woman is running for a school committee, and she's been on the wrong side of this, from my opinion anyway, and she's a long-time activist all around town. Are you going to say something?
Well, no, you're right. I think we have to recognize that all around the country, this is happening everywhere. Yeah. Some places you have stealth candidates who are running, whose allegiances are to extremist groups like Moms for Liberty, which the Southern Poverty Law Center has described as extremist, as a hate group. Parents Defending Education is described as a hate group, as an extremist group. And so in the Northeast, it's hard to run explicitly and directly tied to these groups. But in places like Florida, under the governorship of DeSantis, people run with pride as Moms for Liberty candidates or Parents Defending Education. And so in Massachusetts, you have an interesting situation, interesting dynamic, where they're trying to run more or less as stealth candidates. Now, we haven't seen this in Newton, but we have seen it, as you pointed out, Marjorie, in other communities around Massachusetts.
Well, a stealth candidate like the new speaker says he loves old people.
He's pro-human.
He is pro-human, no, and human hearts, of course. Can I ask, in your reporting, you quote some Harvard professor who's an expert in education saying, yes, it is true that fewer kids in Newton are taking AP classes, which obviously is a concern. If I were a parent in Newton, I'd have that concern too. But he said it's not related to DEI. What is it related to if it's not DEI? Is it the after effect of COVID? I mean, what is the conventional wisdom, Meg Wilhouse?
Well, I mean, it's a really good question, I think, because we went to, I think a lot of the inroads that groups like Philip outlined make into communities are by getting parents whipped up about educational standards slipping. Parents are thinking, I just spent $1 gajillion on a house, I want to live in Newton, right? And what you're telling me now that the academics have slipped? But what's really going on is people in the community are using that as a bit of an inroad to spread, ideas about programming that has no scientific, no correlation to reality. So what we did was we went to Martin West, who's on the State Board of Education. Also, it's so funny because you reach out to people for interviews and they're like, well, I live in Newton. It happens all the time, right? Yeah. Martin West lives in Newton. He's a dean at Harvard, and he crunched the numbers to look at AP scores, and he found that, yes, there has been a decline in Newton over the last decade in AP scores. But that has no connection to DEI, and he was very clear saying there's nothing that points to DEI as the problem.
Speaking of Martin West, so here's a quiz for the two of you. I hope I get this right. What city, I think it's in America, but at least in Massachusetts, has more Nobel Prize winners living there than any other city? Go ahead.
Should we say Newton?
Newton, ding, ding, ding. That is the answer to the question. Talk about useless trivia. So, Philip, what's next here? Is this the defeat of the slate, the end of this, or what now?
It's likely not the end of this. I should also point out that one of the other changes that occurred in the school was tracking. Tracking has always been problematic.
Explain what that is, please.
Well, tracking basically is a way of slotting students into areas where it's assumed they belong intellectually or in terms of their potential. And a lot of this occurs in elementary schools and middle schools. And so Newton has changed its tracking, creating a more equitable a plane, if you will, for students going into various classes and so on and so forth, students of various abilities. And a lot of folks have pushed back against the changes in tracking, though there have been efforts for years, decades, to try to change tracking. And you asked what's next, Jen.
Because it's discriminatory.
Because it's discriminatory, that's right. That's very important to point out. And what's next? I think there are several things that might be happening. We should look at what the upcoming school committee election to see, because it's not clear what everyone's position is. Who's
is buying. That this week or is that
that's
next year?
That's this coming
this
week. That's right.
Okay.
The school committee might be a determinant of how parents are reacting to this in terms of who they're supporting and so on and so forth. We should also look at the various school councils at Newton North and Newton South. A lot of the upstanders were voted onto this council, but we'll see what happens in the future. And we also have to see what is happening nationally. Again, efforts by groups like Parents Defending Education to make inroads in Massachusetts. Newton, they have not succeeded that well, though they continue to receive so-called incident reports about, and what they call incident reports are reports where people support DEI or support LGBTQ rights in the schools. And so these incident reports have been filed in Lexington, in Dover, in Brookline, in Wellesley. Again, relatively liberal suburbs.
Yeah, and all alleging this reverse racism in whatever capacity, in school theater productions or in clubs and groups that kids want to join, and maybe they want to have an affinity group.
That's right. And that's a really important point that Meg just pointed out. Khalil Mohammed, who is also a professor at Harvard, has pointed out that a lot of these groups who use these language that seem innocuous, that this is not a new effort. This is, again, another effort to make inroads into liberal communities by using language that people can accept.
Does Khalil Mohammed live in Newton too?
That's a good question.
You guys did
Does he have a
fabulous
gas
work on
leaf
this, in all
blower? That's what we have to find out, really. They're a
Huge
menace, Jim.
contribution. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank you
so
very
much.
much, both of you, for coming
Thank
in.
you. It's
Appreciate
really
it.
great.
Thanks for
We've
having
been
us.
speaking
Thank
with
you.
GBH Senior Executive Reporter Philip Martin and Education Desk Editor Meg Woolhouse. Thanks again to both of you for coming in. After a quick break, we're talking about the secret, or maybe not so secret, for some of us anyway, the power of swearing. Dropping a few S-bombs, F-bombs, MF-bombs here and there help you relieve stress. Jim is number one to ask about this question. Or should we all be cramming bars of soap into our mouths for saying those bad words? 877-301-8970, call or text. Actually, supposedly, swearing is good for you. I'm not sure I believe it, but that's the claim. And we are not allowed, we should remind us, to swear on the air. 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. In 20 minutes, our show will be over, and the premiere of the Culture Show will be on 89.7. Do not go away. So I know you're expecting us to talk about my favorite topic, making daylight saving year-round. We're going to save that for Monday until after the actual abomination happens Sunday night. Instead, till the end of the show, we're going to open up phone and text lines, ask you about a discussion about words we cannot say on GBH airwaves. A piece out this week in the Times, New York Times, contends with the so-called secret power of swearing. It can help us withstand pain. That is totally true. It can release tension. Also true. Excuse me.
How would you know?
Because I curse a decent amount, and it helps. Help foster social connections.
Yep.
The number to call is 877-301-8970. Do you relate to the joys of a four-letter word here or there? Does profanity bother you like it bothers Marjorie, or empower you? And what in any case, for good measure, here's the late, great George Carlin on this subject.
Well, we have more ways to describe dirty words than we actually have dirty words. That seems a little strange to me. It seems to indicate that somebody was awfully interested in these words. They kept referring to them. They called them bad words, dirty, filthy, foul, vile, vulgar, coarse, cursing, cussing, swearing, and all I could think of was shit, piss, suck a motherfucker and tits.
877-301-8970. Where are you on swearing? I have to admit, I occasionally use a swear word off the air.
Jim, I don't like to say this, but you are probably one of the most foul-mouthed people that I know.
So nice of you to say.
Right.
Thank you.
And, I mean, you can think about a little self-control from time to time.
Wait a second. Excuse me. Yesterday, you and I were working with our great buddy Ryan Landry for his Christmas play,
It was
and we
a
were
very
rehearsing our
painful
lines. We're participants. You dropped more than a couple F-bombs
because he made me do it. He made me do it. He said it was going to be very funny, and so if I screamed these swears, it would be very funny.
Okay, if you close your hand in your car door, or you burn it on your stove. What do you say?
I swear.
Okay, and does
Yep.
that not relieve the pain? Yes, it does.
Well, I think that's one of the most
Yes, it
interesting things. They
does.
talk about how if you put your hands in ice water, people that swear while their hands are ice water can withstand the ice water more.
Exactly.
And the famous thing, this childbirth scenes where the sweet mother of two is all of a sudden swearing to beat the band all over the labor
helps
and
her get
delivery
through it.
room, swearing mostly at her husband who put her into this situation. So I guess
Did you read
there's-
the research on this?
Yeah.
Makes you more trustworthy. People like me swear more. Excuse me. Thank you, Jamie.
No one thinks you're trustworthy,
It gives
Jim.
you more physical strength. Like if you're straining to do something and you drop an F-bomb
Yep.
or something, you're more likely to do it because you can use a swear word, for lack of a better expression, directed at somebody, hopefully not in a terribly hostile way. It helps you avoid a physical
I
harm.
thought that was interesting. You could shout things out
Instead
the window.
of punching somebody out or getting
yep,
punched at
yep.
yourself. And most importantly, I think is most significant, all the research suggests that smarter people swear more. And we want to know if you agree. At 877-301-8970 is the number. And by the way, we know you're sensitive to this. Marty and I were talking yesterday. Every Thursday we do our favorite segment, which is Am I the A-hole?
Right.
And Marjorie reads a lot of texts off the air.
People that are
says,
upset.
Can't you call
That's
it
right.
jerk? And the
They're
answer
very
is,
upset.
no, we
Well,
can't.
Clearly, there are people that are very upset about us using the word a-hole. But on the other
By
hand,
the way, we're not even saying the offensive word. We're
but
saying a-hole.
Jamie, one of our colleagues here, says, no, it's Juanita who said it. Jamie is another one of our colleagues, Juanita, who said...
You may want to say who Juanita is.
Juanita works here as a security guard.
That's
She's right
great.
over there. She says, you cannot get through life without swearing.
Thank you. Exactly.
That's Jim's
Why
motto.
would you? Also, Juanita, why would you want to? That's the other question. 877-301-8970. And by the way, I will be honest, I swear a little bit more than Marjorie does. You occasionally have a moment.
I swear.
Where you
I'm not saying I don't swear. I
explode.
don't swear as much as you do.
No.
But I swear. I think it's kind of how you were brought up. You know
why?
Why?
I'm more trustworthy.
You're more trustworthy.
That's what it said in the research.
Okay,
More
okay.
trustworthy people.
Here's the deal. I
What's
think
that?
swearing has become much more acceptable. I mean, people did not used to swear as much
Is this
20
like
years
we don't
ago.
learn grammar? Is that
Well,
what you're
no.
gonna say?
I think that one of the things that we're shocked at now is
What
not
is it?
swearing. It's things we just talked about, with Philip and Meg. People really don't like racist remarks. They don't like sexist remarks.
Well, they shouldn't like racist
That's
remarks.
right. Those kinds of things are now shocking. If you hear somebody
What
say
does an
those-
F-bomb have to do with racism?
Nothing. What I'm saying is that has become an accepted word, whereas
Oh, I
slurs
see.
against other groups of people, which is a good thing, have become shocking and unacceptable now.
Okay, 877-301-8970. You know, it's also one amazing thing. I've said this in the air before.
Yeah.
The fact that I do use words that I can't use on the air so regularly off the air.
It's amazing you haven't
and
said 'em.
24 years, I think I've said one
Yeah.
time I made a mistake
Well,
in all
I
those
think it's been
years.
more than
And
that.
John, I think John,
There's the
caller,
7-second delay,
saved
thank
us,
God.
yeah.
But, to show just how young...
By the way, excuse me, Pamela just texted. This is actually a very important text. She says, F you, Jim. Wow, I do feel smarter now. Well, that's exactly how it works, Pamela.
as I was saying, people are starting swearing at much younger
They are,
ages.
yeah.
This is a shocking one, I guess we'd have to admit. This is our soon-to-be executive producer of Boston Public Radio here, Anthony Bologna.
Who's he?
Well, he happens to be the son of our executive producer.
How old is
and
he?
he's responded. He was 2 at the time of the particular offense.
Yeah.
He's now 4, and things have only gotten worse. But he's responding at 2 to a text from Jim Browdy.
Well, that was a bleeping idiot, is what this 2-year-old
Yes,
little boy
you
said.
F-bomb idiot.
Idiot. Thank you very much.
You have to be
you're
careful not to
raising him
actually
well,
swear.
by the way. Congratulations
No, it's very good.
to
It's
you
very
and your
good.
husband.
Yep.
Galen and Quincy, you are first on the swearing hour here on Boston Public Radio. Hey, Galen, what's up?
Hey, Jim. Hey, Marjorie. Great to be on.
Thanks for calling.
Yeah, I just want to say I swear a lot, but I also say other things.
Like what?
To substitute if I'm around people that I can't swear with. Like, barnacles or Sandra Bullock.
Okay.
But that's not quick, Galen. I know a lot of people do that. That's not really satisfying, is it?
I don't know. If I stub my toe and I yell, balls or fudge ripples, it does the job.
Really?
Really?
Fudge
Now,
ripples?
Are you doing this because you don't want to
Fudge
swear?
ripples?
Yeah, fudge ripples. That's an unusual one. Are you doing this because you don't want to swear in front of your children or your partner? What's it about, Galen? Or your coworkers?
It just became a habit. I just mix it up.
Yeah, Mitt Romney. What is Mitt Romney? Mitt Romney doesn't even say the word hell, which nobody's going to get in trouble for saying.
H-E double hockey sticks.
H-E double hockey sticks. I mean, can you imagine that? Maybe you should hang around with Mitt Romney, Galen. You might find some common ground there. I don't know.
Hey, Galen, thanks. You know what Zoe just wrote us a note? Zoe, our colleague, wrote about Hannah, another one of our colleagues. This is beyond belief. Hannah, earlier in the show, said the word frack. Frack, not as in fracking, like in gas, and then apologized. So I think we know which camp she's in, says Zoe.
She's with me.
She's raised a lot better than I was,
she's with
obviously.
me. And then she also said that we all just shouted fudge ripples in the control room, and it didn't feel half bad.
No, it's not. Fudge ripples does not do the trick for
Okay.
me, for Galen, not me.
Hey,
Lisa,
Lisa in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi there, how are you?
Excellent.
Fine, thanks.
So, I just wanted to share a little anecdote of when I met Governor Charlie Baker. We were both at Union College. His younger son went there,
Right.
as did my daughter.
Oh.
And I just went up and introduced myself, and there was something in the news recently that I wanted to talk to him about. But we just started gabbing, and he was telling me about his son, who was a senior, who was offered a job at a place where he had an internship. And the son was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to take it. I don't think I want to do that. And this is the first time I've met the governor. He comes out and says, well, I told him to take the effing job. And I'm thinking, this is my governor, you know? And it was just a fun day.
Well, let me tell you, Lisa, Charlie Baker has a Boy Scout image kind of thing, but without going into detail, I took him out to dinner after he lost his first race against Deval Patrick, and trust me, what you just described, just the tip of the effing iceberg, trust me. Lisa, thank you very much. That was a pretty good story.
Yeah, that was a pretty good story.
877-301-8097. By the way, is your problem with, I know you well enough to know, here's what I think your problem with swearing is. You think it is a cheap way for people to speak, cheap and easy way to make a point rather than trying to articulate your position. I bet you that's it. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know what it is. I think it's become like an adjective. You know, everything
And
is
what's
described.
wrong with it?
I don't know. It's just weird to say it's a nice day. It's a effing great dress. I mean, somehow it doesn't really
What
work.
if it is?
You know what I mean? Well, I don't know. It seems like you think of a better adjective. Maybe it's the way I was brought up. You know, we weren't supposed to swear in my house. Maybe that has
How
to
about
do with
this? Sunday night is the end of effing daylight saving time for 4 months.
I mean, I
is
tell
that
you something.
appropriate?
I think you swore all the time around your kids, didn't you?
My younger daughter, I
Yeah.
don't think she'll have a problem with this, has a fairly foul mouth. And my older daughter, when you ever hear her even in passing use a curse word, you like, oh my God.
So what's
I can't
that
believe
about?
that came out of her mouth. One degenerate and one, no, love them to death, both of them.
Okay.
Only kidding, see ya.
Charlene and Natick, thank you for
Charlene, what's
calling.
up?
Hi, I swear, and for 35 years being married, my husband has pleaded with me to stop dropping the F-bomb. And I would try and replace it with my Irish oath, you know, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Oh, God, I
when
heard
got
that a
married.
million times.
And that, I'd say, that's a prayer. But when the Trump stuff started coming about, I just couldn't help it. It opened the door to the F-bomb. I would be swearing at the television until I stopped watching the news. And my husband only 3 times in our marriage in 35 years has dropped an F-bomb. And I have stopped what I was doing and yelled at him and said, excuse me. So I know that it's not fair, but I am guilty.
Well, that's
So
another
why-
thing we can blame on Trump.
Yeah, so why do you think your husband has almost never dropped an F-bomb?
I don't know. He must have been raised in a very stifled family.
Yeah.
I don't know. They just must not have used it. Or he doesn't get agitated to the way I do, so he doesn't need to express himself that way. Like I said, 3 times in 35 years, and I stopped him in his tracks and said, excuse me. But the bottom line is I was raised, you know, with a colorful vocabulary in our house, I guess.
Got it. Hey, Charlene,
that's a
keep
great
doing
call.
what you're
Here's
doing.
a great
Thanks.
question. What is the history behind not swearing on the radio? Why can't you do it? And there are those certain words, right?
Isn't
There's
that an
7 of
FCC
them.
thing?
It's the Federal Communications Rule,
Commission,
right?
I believe.
That says you can't say these
not
words
sure.
on the air. Thank you,
John.
John. I knew John would know the answer to that, and that is correct. But you have heard in some extremist situations like the wars, where you hear some.
We were on night. It's funny you say that. The only time I think it's ever gotten through, and John has been our producer for much of our radio career, in fact, almost all of it. We were on 24 hours on 9/11. Do you remember at our old radio station?
Yes.
And I remember a woman who was totally destroyed by what happened at like 2 a.m. who dropped an F-bomb. And we didn't even blink because then it sort of, fit in a big time sort of way. But it's an FCC. And by the way, in many ways, it is ridiculous. If you do a cable television show, you can drop as many F-bombs as you want. If you do a broadcast television show, the exact same show with the exact same actors and the exact same script, you can get fined if you use the same language you use down the dial. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, but it can go overboard. Did
you watch Sopranos?
Sopranos, every other word.
What would the Sopranos have been with? I'm totally serious about this. What would it have been like without this language?
Well, they were mobsters. I mean, I don't think you want them to be setting the pace. You know what I mean? Guys that murder people and slice them up into little pieces. I watched The Wire. They did it on The Wire too.
Okay, two best shows have ever been on television.
A long time ago, when I worked at Boston Magazine, I wrote a piece. This is a long time ago about Mike Barnacle, and Mike Barnacle is a man who's also got a very. And we used to actually put the word in print then, the F word in print, but you can't have it every fifth word. You know what I mean? It's just too much.
How about every sixth word?
Every sixth word.
Let's go to.
Listen to this anonymous texter says, a leaf blower blew debris into my eye yesterday after listening to the show all about the topic of gas leaf blowers on my way to the eye doctor right now, the texter says. Swearing helped, but it did not resolve the whole problem.
But in all seriousness, the one thing is totally true. When you're in pain, there's no question that screaming out swear words helps.
Here's a question. Didn't Trump say the word S-hole nations?
Yeah, and you know what drove me nuts about that?
Aired it. Did we air it?
Well, I don't know if they aired it, but the New York Times, I think...
Dot,
yeah. Which is ridiculous. If it's said by a president of the United States, I mean, how ridiculous is that? That's what he said. Get over it. Let's go. I don't know if I'm going to get your name right. Is it Capel in Belmont, or am I wrong?
Yes. No, it's Cabell.
Cabell. Cabell.
Yeah,
I know you.
Yes.
Hey, Cabell. How are you?
I'm great, and I really appreciate this topic because of all that's going on in the world right now. This is just really making me laugh. But it's also very relevant for what's going on in my house because my son just submitted some of his college apps, and his personal essay begins with, I swear a lot. And I get it from my father. And this is something that, my kids have made so much money on swear jars in this house, too. And I always thought it was a Massachusetts thing because I'm from Virginia, and I was raised that there is plenty of words in the English language, and you do not need to fall back on curse words.
Hey, Cabell, where did your kid go after that? I don't mean where did he end up in college. Where did he go with his essay after I swear a lot?
He gets it from his father and his yaya because he's half Greek. So
that's pretty good.
That's where I thought it was a Massachusetts thing. That's why I was like, this is a Northerner thing. We don't do this where I'm from. So it's been a topic in our house, very much alive right now because of that application, and we'll see if he gets in.
Good luck to your kid.
He will.
I hope he will too. I hope he does. Cabell, it's nice to hear your voice. Thanks for calling. Appreciate it.
Effective swearing is an art I admire. I'm in awe of the writing of Veep. Remember that show with Louis Dreyfus?
One of the greats ever.
How could that brilliant show have made its points without swearing? Then Carl from New Hampshire says the F word has become used so much it's lost its power, especially movies and TV. It's become comical, ridiculous, and pathetic.
Again, I repeat, I would ordinarily agree if you watch The Sopranos, one of the two best shows ever, no one would ever say Tony Soprano and the boys curse too much. That's just simply not true. Show's over, Marjorie.
It's over.
Yeah, see when the
we have
clock
so many
says
more
2
texts.
minutes.
Erica from Maynard says she loves to swear for emphasis.
Well, that is it. Well, that's what the adjective effing is all about. It's emphasis, isn't it?
It is emphasis. I guess it's emphasis. But like I say, you use it so much it becomes like ridiculous.
By the way, the anonymous texter, I said the S word on NECN went out on national television on NBC when just before Jahar Tsarnaev, it's a long story, was captured in Watertown. And but I didn't do it knowing that I was still mic'd.
Yeah, it's the hot mic mistake.
Hot mic mistake.
Which you hope to avoid making.
We do.
I made a few of them myself.
You have.
Anyway, thanks for listening to another edition
Oh, I
of
forgot.
Boston
Right, I
Public
did that.
Radio.
I taped that show on NECN where I opened by screwed it up and I said effing like 4 times.
Yeah,
It
you
was
did.
broadcast. I
That's
forgot
right.
about that one too.
You can keep up with us 24/7 way of our podcast, which is cleverly called Boston Public Radio.
I love that
Tomorrow, tune in Monday rather, for the NAACP's Michael Curry, the Ground Truth Project Charlie Sennett, going to tell us more about the history and background of Israel and Gaza and what is going on over there right now. Former editor of the Washington Post and the Boston Globe, Marty Barron, great new book, Collision of Power, Trump, Bezos, and the Washington Post. Imagine colliding with Trump and Bezos at the same time, plus the attorney representing the Medway family who just made it out of Gaza. He's going to be with us to discuss their ordeal. We want to thank our crew.
And the just the just put on leave, meaning soon to be fired, former Everett superintendent. will
That's
join us
right.
too. I'm really looking
We want
forward
to thank
that.
our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Additional support from Ethan Kotler, our engineer, John the Claw Parker, who knows everything, and our executive producer, Jamie Bologna. Special thanks as well to the BPL team, Maddie Geyer, Matthew Glover, and Sandra Lopez-Burke. And stay tuned right after us, the launch of the Culture Show
2 minutes.
here on 89.7 GBH. I'm Marjorie
I'm
Egan.
really excited
I know,
about this.
so am I.
Really good luck to our
Thanks
colleagues.
again for tuning in. Hope you can tune
See
in
ya.
on Monday and have a great weekend.
Bye.